This is Israel's renowned Iron Dome system, crafted to counter the constant rocket and missile threats assaulting the nation several times a year. The Iron Dome is a short-range missile defense system that stands as a guardian over Israel's skies. From its inception in 2007 to its first successful interception in 2010, the Iron Dome has quickly become a national symbol and a pride of Israeli defense. To this day, the Iron Dome system has intercepted over 8,000 rockets and artillery shells. It became operational in 2011, and to this day the system has a success rate of over 96%, meaning it has stopped the vast majority of rockets that have been fired at Israel from Gaza and Lebanon. But how does it work? First, let's grasp why Israel felt the need to create such an impressive weapon. Then we will get into how it works. Like always, be sure to hit the like button as it helps out the video a lot, and let's get started. Israel is a small nation with a total area of 8,630 square miles. Emerged on May 14, 1948, and almost immediately sparked a major Arab-Israeli conflict. The creation of Israel ignited major confrontations known as the Arab-Israeli War from 1948 through 1949, or the War of Independence in Israel. Following the Declaration of Independence, neighboring Arab states invaded Israel, marking the start of a long series of conflicts and tensions between Israel and the Arab world. The war ended in 1949 with the signing of armistice agreements between Israel and neighboring Arab states. This agreement led to the establishment of the Green Line, marking Israel's borders, which remained until 1967. Meanwhile, Israel secured its sovereignty and increased its territory by about 50% compared to the UN partition plan. The war resulted in significant loss of life and displacement. Many Palestinians became refugees. Israel's relations with its Arab neighbors remained hostile, laying the groundwork for future conflicts, including the Suez Crisis in 1956, the Six-Day War in 1967, and the Yom Kippur War in 1973. Today, these challenges still persist. To the north, Iran-backed Hezbollah poses a big threat. In the east, the Golan Heights acts as a military buffer against threats from war-torn Syria, with Iranian and Russian forces in play. To the south, the Gaza Strip under Hamas control is a hotspot for recurring conflict, marked by regular rocket attacks and military actions. Iron Dome was primarily developed in response to the rocket threats from terrorist groups like Hezbollah and Hamas. Back in the 1990s, Hezbollah started firing rockets into northern Israel. The attacks peaked in 2006 during the Second Lebanon War, with 4,000 rockets landing in Israel. At least 157 Israelis were killed during the conflict, which also resulted in nearly 400,000 Israelis being driven from their homes in the north. Those who remained had to spend extended periods in bomb shelters. This conflict alone caused over $1.5 billion in damage to northern Israel. In the south, over several years, more than 6,000 rockets were fired from the Gaza Strip by Hamas. In total, nearly 2 million Israelis were in direct danger from these attacks, a big security issue for the country. While these attacks have wounded and killed many Israeli civilians, they also seed psychological stress, trauma, and disrupt everyday life. To address this, Israel developed an early warning system for its citizens known as Red Color, which became operational in several southern and northern Israeli cities within rocket range. Upon detecting a threat, a distinct two-tone alert rings out twice across the cities, followed by a voice announcing Red Color in Hebrew. This alarm echoes until all rockets have either hit or no more launches are detected. Although the warning grants merely a 15-second lead, it's a crucial window for residents to scramble to safety, adding a layer of precaution amid the looming threat of rocket attacks. Meanwhile, Israel was on a hunt to find a better solution for these air attacks. By 2007, Israel started developing the Iron Dome, a system to shoot down incoming rockets and to protect the whole country. With a boost from the United States, particularly during the Obama administration, the Iron Dome's development accelerated. By 2010, it intercepted its first missile, and come 2011, it was deployed nationwide, forming a protective canopy over Israel. At its core, the Iron Dome comprises three main components: a sophisticated radar to detect or locate incoming threats, a control system to process this information and decide when to launch interceptor missiles, and mobile firing units laden with Tamir rockets ready to intercept the threats. Unlike conventional defense systems located at a single site, the Iron Dome battery adopts a scattered deployment pattern. Each launcher within this battery houses 20 interceptor missiles. These missiles are independently deployed and operated through a secure wireless connection, forming a protective net with a reach of up to 75 kilometers in every direction. This unique deployment strategy augments the Iron Dome's coverage, ensuring a wide swath of land remains shielded from aerial threats. This is where the battle management and control system steps in. By calculating the potential threat and impact zone of the incoming missile, the BMC decides whether to engage or ignore the threat. Remarkably, if the system deduces the projectile will land in an uninhabited area, it chooses not to intercept, saving both resources and ammunition. When a threat necessitates interception, the missile firing unit springs into action. Within mere seconds, Tamir interceptor missiles, each priced at around $40,000 to $100,000 each, are launched towards the incoming threat, seeking to neutralize it in midair before it can reach its intended target. The efficiency and speed of Iron Dome are astounding, boasting an impressive interception rate of over 95%. However, it's not without its criticisms. The Iron Dome system, while highly effective, has a significant downside. Each interception comes with a high price tag, and the system can be overwhelmed during large-scale missile attacks. For instance, if Israel launches 1,000 interceptor missiles, the cost skyrockets to about $100 million. On the flip side, Hamas can fire 4,000 rockets at a cost of $300 to $800 each, totaling a budget of just $3 to $4 million. This could spell a long-term financial strain for Israel, compelling it to pour a large chunk of its budget into defense. But despite its hefty price tag, the Iron Dome stands as a marvel in the defense industry. Its remarkable effectiveness has not only solidified its position in Israel's defense, but also paved the way for international sales. Since 2016, Israel has been selling the Iron Dome to other nations. Azerbaijan, India, Romania, the United States, NATO members South Korea, and Singapore are among the countries that have adopted this system, showcasing the Iron Dome's global trust and effectiveness. Israel has not rested on the laurels of the Iron Dome. To address high costs and enhance defense, they've introduced new systems: Iron Beam, Scorpius T, Scorpius N, and Scorpius G. Let's delve into each of these, understanding how they contribute unique strengths to Israel's defense arsenal. Iron Beam is a laser weapon designed to combat aerial threats at a fraction of the cost. Unlike its cousin Iron Dome, which uses Tamir missiles to destroy enemy rockets and missiles, the Iron Beam deploys concentrated laser beams to neutralize threats like drones, rockets, and mortars. The Russia-Ukraine war showcased drones as a major game changer on the battlefield. In this context, Israel's Iron Beam could be a crucial defense asset. With its ability to swiftly neutralize drones, Iron Beam could provide Israel and its forces a significant protective edge in major conflicts, marking a step forward in modern anti-drone defenses. This project is still in the experimental phase and is expected to be launched by 2024. Not only does Iron Beam signify a notable advance in laser defense technology, but it also cuts interception costs drastically. Where the Iron Dome demands $50,000 to $100,000 for each interception, Iron Beam requires merely $2 to $5, making a huge leap towards cost-effective defense. While the Iron Beam sounds promising, defense experts highlight some weaknesses, like its short range. Israel and the U.S. are discussing cooperation to refine the technology. Here's how the Iron Beam system works. The Iron Beam has three main parts: a laser gun on a swiveling turret, a surveillance system to spot threats, and a command center for operators to control it. The laser gun shoots a fiber optic beam using 100 kilowatts of power, which is about 3 days worth of electricity for a typical U.S. household. Here's Iron Beam in action, taking down a UAV, mortar, and a rocket. The Iron Beam is also compatible to work with multiple air defense systems, including the Iron Dome. Despite its promise, the Iron Beam has hurdles to overcome. It struggles with limited range, weather sensitivity, and location issues. For example, bad weather like rain or clouds can mess with its sensors, making it less reliable during Israel's chilly months of November and December. When Iron Beam falls short, the Iron Dome will take over to fill the defense gap. Another challenge for the Iron Beam is its range. As the laser travels, it loses power, making its impact weaker, a phenomenon known as the bloom effect. The laser beam widens and becomes diluted over distance, lessening its effectiveness. Additionally, the speed at which it neutralizes threats poses a challenge. Unlike the Iron Dome, which intercepts quickly, the Iron Beam takes some time. When activated, the laser hits the target instantly, but needs to stay on it for a while to cause damage. This delay could hinder its ability to handle multiple incoming rockets, especially when compared to the rapid response of the Iron Dome. Israel's venture into laser weapons aligns with a worldwide interest in this technology. Nations like the US, Russia, and China are also exploring laser weaponry, hinting at its potential to be a game changer in future warfare.
Iran could now make enough nuclear material for a bomb in just 12 days now.
This facility is quite large. It's big enough to house about 100,000 centrifuges.
And make no mistake, Iran will not be satisfied by a single nuclear bomb.
A few months ago, the head of the International Atomic Energy Agency paid a visit to Iran. The reason for this visit was sinister. Just a few days earlier, news broke out that Iran may very well be close to acquiring nuclear weapons. Now, the fact that Iran is trying to do this is not particularly shocking. The first investigations into Iran's nuclear programs were already done 20 years ago. What is shocking, though, is how close Iran is. What the International Atomic Energy Agency found was that Iran possessed uranium enriched to 84%. For anyone that doesn't understand the ins and outs of nuclear science, it boils down to this. Iran can make nuclear bombs within 12 days if they wish to. And that's according to top US Defense Department officials, who are looking at the situation very closely. Now, you may think that this isn't that concerning. With the Russia-Ukraine war going on, there is more than enough to worry about when it comes to nuclear bombs. Moscow possesses the biggest nuclear arsenal in the world, with close to 6,000 nuclear warheads. But Iran getting nuclear bombs is very concerning. This change will shake the entire geopolitical landscape of the Middle East. You see, a lot of countries don't like it when Iran tries to make these powerful weapons. For one, Israel has said it would attack Iran in the scenario that it gets close to acquiring nuclear capabilities. Yes, Israel will actually send in fighter jets to attack Iran's nuclear facilities. And since Israel is a big military ally of the United States, you can see how this can go downhill very fast. The Middle East has been plagued by wars, many with the US involved in them. Add to that Iran's many enemies in the region, such as Saudi Arabia, and the chaos is complete. In this video, we're going to talk about how Iran getting nuclear weapons can spark a major conflict. We'll go over all the different parties involved in this potential disaster, and why Iran would even do this in the first place. And surprise, surprise, Russia might be helping out Iran. Before I jump in, just a quick request to hit that like button. Your likes make a huge difference in how many views my videos get. YouTube doesn't like promoting videos that are not quote-unquote brand friendly. Your likes tell the algorithm that the video is worth promoting. So please, let's try to get this video to 100,000 likes. All right, let's jump into the video. When we look at this chart showing Iran's GDP over the last 10 years, it becomes obvious that the economy isn't running smoothly in the country. The GDP numbers have been slashed by almost 50% over this 10-year period. The reason for this is simple. Lots of countries have put a ton of sanctions on Iran, which mainly target the country's economy and its military. For some time, Iran was the most heavily sanctioned country on Earth. This was true for many years until Russia came and snatched Iran's title away from them. Right now, Iran has amassed a total of 4,191 sanctions. Mainly Western countries, such as the US or European nations, have placed these sanctions on Tehran. The reason for these sanctions is Iran's nuclear program. Iran has been suspiciously trying to build nukes over the last decades, something that many Western countries found concerning. Back in 2002, it was revealed that Iran was building 2 secret nuclear sites. Iran claimed that these sites were for peaceful purposes, such as nuclear energy. But because Iran is an oil-rich country without much need for nuclear energy, this kind of raised some questions. After some diplomatic talks that followed, Iran agreed to the Paris Accord in 2004. This accord said that Iran could enrich uranium only for peaceful purposes, and that the International Atomic Energy Agency could keep their eye on this. However, this plan eventually failed because the nuclear program wasn't transparent enough. International researchers couldn't properly evaluate the nuclear program because they weren't allowed into some of Iran's military facilities. The US and the EU began placing sanctions on Iran in fear that Iran might actually produce nuclear weapons. There was some hope in 2014 when China, Russia, the European Union, and the United States made a deal with Iran. This deal, called the Joint Comprehensive Plan of Action, was supposed to keep Iran from getting a nuclear arsenal. In turn, other countries wouldn't place sanctions on Iran. But in 2018, the Trump administration stepped out of this nuclear deal with Iran. When the deal was no longer in place, the status quo began to change. Iran began to ramp up its uranium enrichment, and in turn, it received a lot of sanctions for it. Western countries, and especially the US, began to target every aspect of the Iranian economy. This hurt Iran financially. The inflation rate is now above 40%, and the country lost billions of dollars in GDP in a few years. So, Iran enriching uranium and trying to develop a nuclear bomb has a very heavy price. The question is, why? Why is Iran trying to make nuclear bombs in the first place? After all, wouldn't it be much easier to terminate the nuclear weapons program and not get these heavy sanctions? The first thing we should look at is Iran's leadership. Iran has a theocratic government, effectively ruled by the Islamic clergy. The country's supreme leader has the highest political and religious authority. The current supreme leader, Ali Khamenei, has been kind of vague on what his nuclear ambitions are. Officially, the leader has said that nuclear bombs are forbidden under Islamic law because they lead to the deaths of innocent people. But these statements don't add up with what the Iranian government is actually doing. You can't say that nuclear bombs are bad and at the same time be enriching uranium to near weapon-grade levels. There are no civilian programs that need 84% enriched uranium. And keep in mind that the supreme leader can change the Islamic law anytime he wants to. So the ruling against nuclear bombs isn't really that trustworthy. It doesn't take a genius to see that Iran's leadership is planning something here. But what? Well, the answer lies in Iran's foreign policy. Iran has made a lot of enemies, both in the Middle East and internationally. One of the countries that Iran doesn't get along with is the United States. Both parties are to blame for this strained relationship. It began with the United States, which aided in a 1953 coup overthrowing the democratically elected government of Iran. The coup replaced the Iranian prime minister with a pro-Western dictator. Since then, the Iranian public has had a strong dislike of the United States. After 1979, this relationship between the two countries got even worse. During the Islamic Revolution, Iranian revolutionaries seized the US embassy in Tehran and held American diplomats hostage for 444 days. This effectively ended diplomatic relationships between the two countries. When Iraq invaded Iran in 1980, the US provided intelligence to Saddam Hussein to help Iraq fight Iran. This also didn't help the already strained relationship. To this day, Iran and the US are big enemies of each other. The United States has said that Iran is among the greatest threats to its interest and allies in the Middle East. Historically, one of the main US interests in the region has been energy security. But at the moment, these energy security interests are minimal. The United States imports more oil from Canada than the entire Persian Gulf region combined. Right now, US influence in the region is mostly about geopolitics and global security. The United States is building strategic alliances with certain countries in the region to advance its own interests. This is something that Iran doesn't like. They want the United States out of the region and to get more influence themselves. So, the allies of the United States in the Middle East have become the enemies of Iran. Many of the United States allies are located in the Arabian Peninsula. Both Saudi Arabia and the United Arab Emirates have close ties with the United States. Saudi Arabia and the United Arab Emirates aren't the most reliable partners for the United States, however. After the war in Ukraine started and oil prices surged, the Saudi-led OPEC organization cut oil production, driving up oil prices even further. The United States didn't like this move because these oil-rich countries were profiting off of the war and the inflated oil prices. More recently, Saudi Arabia announced even more oil cuts despite US discouragement. But even though these alliances aren't that reliable, they are extremely important. Saudi Arabia and the UAE are some of the most powerful and influential countries in the Arab world. Washington has strategically built ties with these countries because it provides geopolitical benefits for the US. Having Saudi Arabia and the UAE on your side helps economically and politically. And one of these strategic ties is related to the military. The United States is both Saudi Arabia's and the UAE's top military supplier. As of the writing of this video, the United States is holding military drills with Saudi Arabia, the UAE, and other Gulf countries in Operation Eagle Resolve 23. These exercises are supposed to enhance cooperation and exchange military expertise. And Iran doesn't like this. It thinks that these countries are getting a little too close with the West and Iran's big enemy, the United States. That's why Iran has been fighting a cold war with Saudi Arabia and other Gulf countries. I've already talked about this at length in one of my previous videos, so you can feel free to check that out. But it comes down to this. Iran is fighting Saudi Arabia and its allies in proxy wars throughout the Middle East. Syria, Iraq, and Yemen are all examples of this conflict. Sometimes Iran itself sends in troops, but most of the time Iran supports militias and terrorist groups to achieve its aims. With these proxy wars, Iran is trying to expand its influence in the region to get even more powerful. And with the Cold War going on between Iran and Saudi Arabia, the rivalry is about power more than anything else. Iran doesn't like Saudi Arabia getting all too powerful in the Middle East, which is why it wants to expand its own influence. The tension between the two countries has cooled down significantly, with China's diplomatic helping hand. Saudi Arabia and Iran have recently restored diplomatic ties in an historic rapprochement move, but that doesn't mean the Cold War is completely over. Iran hasn't completely given up on its goals of becoming a regional powerhouse. Iran seeking to acquire nuclear bombs may very well be linked to this remainder of Cold War policy. When you're trying to expand your influence in the region, you want to be dominant in one way or another. Possessing nukes is a great way to do this. Additionally, the chances are small that your enemies will directly attack you when you have a ton of nukes. Because Iran has made a ton of enemies with its Cold War against Saudi-led powers in the region, this is very useful to have as a safeguard. But understandably, Iran's enemies aren't too happy about these nuclear ambitions. Saudi Arabia's foreign minister has said that all bets are off if Iran gets a nuclear weapon. The Saudi crown prince has promised that Saudi Arabia will make its own nuclear bombs when Iran does so. This could very well spark a nuclear arms race in the region, which will make the Cold War that's ongoing even more scary. The Middle East won't get safer when these rivals can wipe each other out with the push of a button.
Over the past week, I've observed our CENTCOM troops participating in Juniper Oak 23 TAC 2 alongside our Israel Defense Forces, operating together on land, in the air, and on sea. The Israeli military partnership is stronger than it was 5 days ago.
Apart from Saudi Arabia, Iran has another enemy in the Middle East, Israel. Israel has had close ties with the United States ever since it was founded in 1948. In fact, the United States was the first country to recognize the State of Israel as a sovereign country. Since World War II, Israel has gotten $158 billion in U.S. foreign assistance for economic aid, but mainly for military purposes. The United States has given Israel more foreign military financing than the rest of the world combined. In 1989, Israel became a major non-NATO ally of the United States, giving the country a level of U.S. military backing. It's fair to say that the U.S.-Israel alliance is a strong one. Recently, U.S. forces trained together with the Israeli military in the Juniper Oak 23 joint exercises. These were the largest ever U.S.-Israel military exercises in history. Israel is, with no doubt, the strongest partner of the United States in the Middle East. Because Israel is such a close US ally, it's also a very big enemy for Iran. Just like with Saudi Arabia, Iran is fighting a Cold War with Israel. But this Cold War is a little more intense. Iran has openly declared its ambition to destroy the state of Israel and wipe it off the map. In 2005, a new Iranian president said that Israel is a disgraceful blot that should be wiped off the face of the earth. More recently, in 2019, Iran's top general said that Israel must be wiped off the map, and that it is an achievable goal. It goes without saying that Israel and Iran, well, they don't like each other very much. For decades, Iran has supported terrorist organizations to conduct attacks in Israeli territory. Hamas, the Palestinian Islamic Jihad, and Hezbollah are all organizations sponsored by the Iranian government. So let's go over how this Cold War has affected the region thus far. On the news, you've probably heard about the Israeli-Palestinian conflict, especially the situation in Gaza. For years now, tons of rockets have been fired from both the Palestinian and Israeli side, in an area known as the Gaza Strip. This region has a complicated history. It is populated by Arab Palestinians, but it was annexed by Israel in 1967. This happened after the Six-Day War with Egypt, Jordan, and Syria, who didn't accept Israel as a newly founded country. After this war, Israel took control over the area as some kind of safety measure to protect itself from further attacks coming from Egypt. But the Israeli forces didn't go away for decades, and many nations have since called it an illegal military occupation. In 2005, Israel disengaged from the Gaza Strip, meaning that the region is officially not under Israeli control anymore. But Israel still controls and blocks the borders of the Gaza Strip, and Israeli forces regularly intervene in the area using force. The reason for this is that Hamas, an Iranian-funded terrorist organization, is in control of the Gaza Strip. Hamas is an extremist organization which wants to destroy the state of Israel just like Iran does. The Iranian government has supplied Hamas with rockets to fire them at Israel. Hamas indiscriminately fired hundreds of rockets at Israel population centers in what human rights groups consider to be war crimes. Most of these rockets were intercepted by Israel's Iron Dome defense system, but some civilians were killed. Israel fired back at the Gaza Strip in attacks which were targeted at terrorists, as they claim. But these attacks also caused many civilian deaths, a lot more than the Palestinian attacks on Israel did. A reason for this is that Palestinians don't have advanced defense and missile systems, unlike the Israelis. But the other reason for the civilian deaths is that terrorist organizations like Hamas use human shields. This means that they fire rockets from and hide in civilian areas, giving Israel no choice but to try and attack these places. Now, I'm not going to pick sides in the complicated Israeli-Palestinian conflict, since that wouldn't be good journalism. But it is crucial to understand that this Israel-Palestine war is closely entangled with the Cold War between Israel and Iran. And the Gaza Strip isn't the only place where this is happening. Lebanon, a country neighboring Israel to the north, has the same phenomenon. The militant and political organization Hezbollah, which is an Iranian proxy in Lebanon, has recently attacked Israeli forces on the Israeli-Lebanese border. Hezbollah has a lot of political influence in Lebanon as a political party, and its parliamentary wing is so strong that the organization can act independent from the Lebanese government. In 2006, Hezbollah killed several Israeli soldiers and abducted 2, prompting an Israeli reaction. In fact, these border skirmishes led to a full-on war between Israel and Lebanon. Israel performed attacks from the ground, air, and sea on Hezbollah facilities in Lebanon. The war lasted for 34 days straight, and it evolved into guerrilla warfare, killing over 1,000 Lebanese in total. Again, this tragic conflict is closely related to the war between Israel and Iran. Hezbollah wouldn't be as powerful as it was if it weren't for Iran. In fact, it wouldn't even exist. Hezbollah was created by followers of Iran's Ayatollah Khomeini, and its first troops were trained by Iranian Revolutionary Guards. To this day, Iran provides training, weapons, and money to the organization. U.S. estimates are that Iran gives $700 million annually to Hezbollah. By doing this, Iran is fighting Israel through its Hezbollah proxy. Another country where Iran and Israel are fighting each other is in Syria. After the Six-Day War in 1967, Israel has occupied another area, the Golan Heights. This former Syrian territory was supposed to be a buffer zone to protect Israel from further Syrian attacks. Because Syria is in a civil war right now, Israel has refused to give up this territory, and Iran has a role in this. The Syrian civil war has a lot of Iranian involvement in it. Iran supports Assad's government by providing weapons, training, technical support, and even thousands of combat troops. A recent example of this is when Iran smuggled weapons into Syria by using earthquake aid convoys as a disguise. Hezbollah, the pro-Iranian Lebanese group, is also actively involved in this civil war. The reason for Iran's support of the Syrian regime is to achieve its own geopolitical goals. For example, Tehran wants to have access to the Mediterranean Sea, and it wants more political influence in the region. The Israeli government doesn't like this. It doesn't want another pro-Iranian country right next to its border. That's why Israel decided to attack Iranian forces and proxies in Syria with air attacks. Starting all the way back in 2013, Israel has conducted hundreds of strikes in Syrian territory. Again, this has to do with the Israeli-Iranian Cold War. Israel is conducting these airstrikes because it doesn't like Iran being too close to its borders. From these three examples in Gaza, Lebanon, and Syria, you can see that this Cold War is pretty serious. Unfortunately, Iran getting nuclear bombs will only make this Cold War even worse. You see, Israel isn't letting Iran get away with producing nuclear bombs. According to Israel's defense minister Benny Gantz, the country is preparing for the possibility of an attack on Iran. Yes, Israel is actually planning to attack Iran. Gantz told his Air Force pilots in a speech that this attack can come in 2 or 3 years. When Iran gets too close to developing nuclear bombs, Israel will send in its fighter jets to try to bomb the Iranian facilities. This sounds like a recipe for disaster. And when Iran gets its nuclear bombs, it will be just that, a disaster. When Israel attacks Iran, it can spark an armed conflict between the two nations. Iran will most likely try to attack Israel back, and it could have the capabilities to do this. Just a few days ago, Iran unveiled a new hypersonic missile called Fatah. Theoretically, this missile can strike Israel in under 7 minutes, making the time for Israel to intercept very limited. Apart from this new hypersonic missile, Iran has an arsenal of other missiles that it can deploy. This will put Israelis' air defenses, such as the Iron Dome, to the test. And when such a direct Iranian counterattack with missiles fails, there are a lot of other options on the table. Tehran can also try to attack using its proxies in Lebanon, Syria, and Palestine to conduct the counterattack. In a very extreme scenario, Iran could even send in its own army to the front lines. But from the point of the Israeli attack onwards, it becomes impossible to predict what happens next. One thing is certain: the risk of escalation is very real. And when Israel and Iran get into war with each other, it will undoubtedly be a costly war. Israel has one of the most advanced militaries in the world. It is highly speculated that Israel already has a nuclear arsenal, which makes it a dangerous country to mess with. Apart from that, the country with just over 9 million people also has some of the world's best fighter jets, tanks, drones, you name it. But how can such a small country have such a good military? Well, for starters, the United States has signed a law to ensure Israel has a qualitative military edge in its region. The United States provides advanced weapons to Israel to make sure that its military is one step ahead of the others in the Middle East. What also helps is Israel's defense budget. The nation spent a whopping $24.3 billion on defense in 2021 alone. Iran can put up with this, though. In 2021, Iran's government spent $24.6 billion on its military. Keep in mind, however, that Iran's population is much bigger, with 87.9 million citizens. Israel has about 170,000 active military personnel, while Iran comes in at 610,000. Both Iran and Israel have their advantages and disadvantages in a possible conflict. Israel has high-tech weapons from the United States, while Iran's army is bigger in absolute numbers. But it doesn't make sense for Iran to risk it and produce nuclear weapons, right? It could result in a nasty and costly war with Israel, and possibly even the United States. And when the United States gets involved, Iran's chances of winning are going to be pretty low. But Iran does have one more card up its sleeve: its newly found alliance with Russia. After the war in Ukraine started, Iran started to form a strategic alliance with Russia. The two countries haven't had the best relationship historically, because the Russian Empire has frequently attacked Iran. But after the fall of the Soviet Union, the nations have seen a significant shift in their relationship. After all, it's not surprising that the number 1 and 2 most sanctioned countries in the world are teaming up with each other. Both countries are facing economic and military pressures from the West, so forming an alliance makes a lot of sense. Iran has supplied Russia with hundreds of drones for the war in Ukraine, like the infamous Shahed 136 suicide drone. This drone has killed hundreds of people in Ukraine, and Tehran has also sent around 300,000 artillery shells and 1 million rounds of ammunition to their new ally. Since the middle of 2022, Iran has become Russia's top military backer. But the question is, why is the Iranian government choosing to do this in the first place? It's not that the main Iranian objective here is just to help Russia fight the war. Sure, Iran is an enemy of the West, just like Russia, so it prefers Russian victory over Ukrainian one. But the purpose of this military support to Russia is obviously for Iran to get something in return, and that's exactly what's happening. Iran wants billions of dollars worth of military equipment from Russia. This can include fighter jets, air defense systems, helicopters, and assistance with producing new warships. Undoubtedly, this will vastly improve Iran's defense capabilities. Iran has been isolated from the rest of the world, which means that its defense industry has always been one step behind other countries. Nations like Israel or Saudi Arabia now have cutting-edge military technology, partially because they could just buy the military equipment from other countries and take part in international arms trades. For a long time, Iran couldn't access this global marketplace. But Russia can prove to be a way out for the country. Although Russia doesn't have the best nor the biggest defense industry, the country accounts for more than a respectable 16% of all international arms exports. Russia's defense industry is a big one, and it produces tons of high-tech equipment. An example of this is the Sukhoi Su-35 fighter jet, which Iran would love to buy. And the military cooperation could go even further than just buying and selling military equipment. The two countries could share each other's military technology and actually start working together with their military programs. An example of such a cooperation could be Iran's nuclear program. Russia can give Iran a helping hand with its nuclear goals. Historically, Russia has been a big partner of Iran's nuclear program, helping the country build nuclear reactors. But it's unlikely that Putin will just hand over some of his Russian nukes to Iran for military use. Even as a form of compensation for the useful support in the Ukrainian war, giving nukes would go a little too far. Putin wouldn't make himself too popular with countries like Israel, Saudi Arabia, or the United Arab Emirates, which will damage Russia's international political position. However, when Russia secretly helps Iran with the research and development of things like delivery systems or nuclear warheads, Putin might get away with it. For example, Russia can share state-of-the-art missile technology with Iran. And believe it or not, it is in Russia's best interest to help Iran with getting nuclear capabilities. It would make Iran a lot stronger, and Iran is an ally of Russia's when it comes to fighting the United States. The United States is helping Ukraine in the war that Russia started, which turned out to be a massive issue for Putin. Ukraine is getting tons of high-tech weapons from the NATO alliance, like tanks and possibly even fighter jets. The war is turning out to be a tough fight for Russia, to say the least. When Iran gets nuclear weapons, though, well, this situation might change. Iran might get into a conflict with Israel, and tensions with Saudi Arabia and other Gulf countries will certainly rise. This will be a headache for the United States, to say the least, because it wants to protect its allies in the region. Good news for Putin, because this draws attention away from his war in Ukraine. The United States has a limited amount of high-tech equipment, So it will have to choose between Ukraine and its allies in the Middle East. Because it seems like a win-win situation for both Russia and Iran, Putin may actually secretly help Iran's nuclear weapons program. So, to wrap it all up, the story of Iran's 84% enriched uranium is a long and complicated one. Possessing nuclear weapons has been a dream of Iran's leaders, because it gives the country a lot of power for an aggressive foreign policy. This has a lot to do with Iran's enemies, such as the United States, Israel, and Saudi Arabia. Iran is fighting 2 Cold Wars at once, and it's trying to get the US out of the Middle East. However, these countries that it's fighting won't let Iran get away with making nuclear bombs. Israel will even risk a war to prevent this from happening. But the Iranian government doesn't seem scared, as its leadership continues to push for a nuclear agenda by increasing the uranium enrichment level even more. If Iran is really developing a nuclear bomb, which is more than likely, the region is in a lot of peril. Iran and its enemies will be playing a dangerous game. Iran will continue to develop its nuclear capabilities, and Iran's enemies will do anything they can to stop it. This can go 2 ways. Either Iran's enemies will be successful in preventing an Iranian nuclear arsenal, or Iran actually gets the nukes it wanted in the first place. In the last scenario, there is no turning back. Iran will be free to execute its own agenda because no one will dare to stop a nuclear power. And Iran isn't the only one rooting for the last scenario to happen. Russia is as well. It turns out that Moscow's interests are aligned with Tehran's. This can be useful when it comes to the Iranian nuclear program, which the Russians could secretly help out with. No matter what the outcome is, this nuclear game can have fatal consequences. When the whole situation goes sideways, Iran might be heading to war.
Alright, we got 30 people, I think. Let's start off with a quick recap of the morning, and then we'll go on to the new updates that happened after we shut off.
Gotcha. Then starting from this morning, we had a sudden surprise attack come out of Gaza, a enormous missile strike with both sides saying different numbers for the number of missiles now. I've seen anything from 2,500 reported by one side to 5,200, and there have been additional missile attacks since then, so I know that that number has increased. In conjunction with the missile attack, there was an assault over the Gaza border, the Gaza fence. They knocked down sections of the fence with bulldozers and drove into Israel, as well as used paragliders to cross over in an air assault, for lack of a better way to say it, and used boats, small like rubber boats, to try and do a naval assault as well onto Israel. They took over, the Hamas militants took over 3 villages or cities in southern Israel and had presence in 7 others. A lot of fighting going on. They were basically going in there and firing at everything indiscriminately. The images from this are just simply shocking, to put it simply, and really I'm understating this a ton. Everybody from police, military facilities, the Hamas militants actually entered and stole equipment from an Israeli military base, including at least 1 tank, multiple Humvees, and armored vehicles. I did see other video of them taking other armored vehicles while they were going along. This is Hamas out of the Gaza Strip is who attacked. Israel was very slow to respond. In fact, it took hours before they began a full response to this attack. And even now, as I understand it, there's still clearing operations going on in the cities that were attacked by Hamas. The Lebanese Lebanese-backed Hezbollah movement has started moving to the border on the north end to maybe take advantage of the situation. They've threatened already to cross the border and attack on the north side if Israel goes into a land assault on the south side. So that's kind of, and then there was a bunch of international talk about it. The other thing is that since then, Israel has started airstrikes into Gaza and been moving tremendous amounts of military equipment into the area near Gaza in preparation for a land assault, which, by the way, has been confirmed by the Israeli authorities.
Yeah, other things I want to add is in the morning we did put out a video where we said it was around 60 or Hamas militant that got into Israel. Later it was confirmed it was around 200-300, so that's a big number. That's why it's taking so long. Especially some of them have barricaded themselves in like Israeli houses with hostages inside, and they have taken some hostages back to Gaza. According to Hamas sources, I think they said they have multiple times more than a dozen hostages. They use that wording because I think Israel was saying they have around a dozen hostages, so they confirm it's many more than that.
Yeah, they've confirmed a much larger number. One of the sources of these hostages, and there's been some video of this showing up as well, there was a music festival happening right near the border between the Gaza Strip and Israel. They were just doing a music festival, and a lot of the prisoners came from that music festival. Just young people partying.
Which is kind of sad because I think the festival was a charity festival held for the peace plan in Gaza. And
Yep.
a lot of the hostages are not even Israeli; they are European, like from other countries.
Yeah, exactly. Now the reaction from the international community so far, there's been a lot of it. Iran has basically admitted to being behind much of this attack. I'm trying to think of the other ones right now. Saudi Arabia, kind of, I don't know. Did you see anything on Saudi Arabia?
They're not behind the attack. They just said Israel.
They just passed on the information.
Yeah,
right?
Israel bears responsibility for that attack. Even Qatar said that, but they have no involvement in the attack.
Other nations, of course, others outside of the Middle East have been saying bad, calling on. Some people are actually still blaming Israel for it. Russia is, for instance. Qatar. Did Qatar go? I think Qatar. I think they did as well.
Israel. Yeah.
And then, of course, the U.S., France, UK, and a bunch of others are pledging support for Israel in defending themselves. The biggest information, as far as I heard a few hours ago, was that Palestinian militants still held the crossing at Ezra or Ezer. Try to see if I can remember where that was. Erez. They still held the Erez crossing. That was as of, I think about 4 hours ago. And I know that there were some battles going on in that area. Just pretty crazy stuff. Let's go ahead and, would you like me to go ahead and move into the additional material here?
Yeah, one thing I would want to point out on the Iran stuff you said, Hamas spokesman did confirm Iran's support for this attack, and he also said other countries supported this attack, but he didn't go into details which other countries.
That's true, he did not. All right, so let's see, flip this over here. We're seeing a lot of things like this right here. The Israeli army this is on the border with Lebanon. They've been placed at their maximum combat readiness because they're expecting Hezbollah to take advantage of the situation. Hezbollah's already threatened to do so. Mobilization, they're getting soldiers moved into the northern, eastern, and southern fronts of the country. This is the Erez crossing that we talked about right here, though I can't play the video, just can't. The original numbers that we had on missiles were from this morning. There's been several additional rounds of missiles fired, 150 about 5 hours ago. No report on the number here. That's been more recent, but still talking anywhere between 3,000 and 6,000 missiles fired at Israel. More of the reservists being called up, just video of them getting material and equipment ready. Over in Negev, which is in, I believe, the northern end of Israel, some Arab youth have begun basically putting tires at intersections, lighting them on fire, and causing an uprising at those areas. It's a mess. It really is. The Israeli army is going street by street and sometimes house by house in the areas where the Hamas militants managed to get a foothold. It's a detailed clearing operation. This is a police station in Sderot, which is one of the first locations that were taken by the Hamas militants. They captured the entire police station and executed the police officers inside. My understanding is that most of them were there on breaks and weren't even armed at the time. The Israelis have up the ante by bringing a bulldozer in, and I believe this is the police station they're bulldozing as their measure to take it back from the Hamas militants. More rocket launches. These are close to the Gaza Strip here, which is on the left side there, that little dotted section. A lot of close-in strikes just to the northeast of the Gaza Strip. The Israeli Minister of Defense, Yoav Gallant, put out a statement. He claimed that they were close to destroying Hamas 15 years ago when he headed the military Southern Command, but that they were stopped by politics effectively. This phenomenon will not continue. We will change reality on the ground in Gaza for the next 50 years. What was before will be no more. We will operate at full force. I ask Israel citizens to remain determined and to support our security forces. Big, massive military buildup near Gaza. They're comparing it to the last one, which is 2014, where they called up 80,000 reservists, and they believe they're called up even more at this point. So we're probably looking at near 100,000 men and under arms moving to the border near Gaza. Ground operations are imminent, though I think they're going to have to clear their towns that are already Israeli before they do so. Especially Ofakim and Biri. They've got hostage situations still in those towns. Once those operations are done and they're reasonably secure, I expect the ground operation to begin. Sam, you've got some information on this, the call for citizens to leave the Gaza Strip, but there's more details.
Yeah,
you got them?
So a lot of people were confused since Israel blocks the border out of Gaza, so basically people can't get into Israel, and I think it's bordering Egypt on the other side, if I'm not wrong. So Egypt also has its border closed, so people are confused that Israel is telling civilians to leave because they're gonna attack, but civilians have nowhere to go. But what Israel is saying is they should just leave the Gaza city and go more inland, because the attack that Israel just announced, the blockade has started. The attack's probably coming in a few hours.
Probably getting him to move farther south, I'd guess, because the Gaza Strip is pretty much just a vertical, almost north-south strip on the edge there.
North, I think, more inland, so away from the Israeli border. Just go more
inland. That would be moving south and southwest.
Okay, yeah.
On the Ayalon Highway, Israeli forces detained a group of militants who are preparing another attack. They are just under arrest here. I could play this, but there's no need to. This is the naval component that Hamas used. Some small landing boats that they tried to land on the coast. They were destroyed, as I understand it. Why did Hamas achieve surprise? This is an item from, I actually got it through BBC Russian, but this is an Israeli military expert, David Gendelman, commenting to the BBC on the circumstances. Why did Hamas achieve surprise? The assessment of Israeli intelligence was that the escalation is now unprofitable for Hamas after friction in recent weeks. Gazans were given more permits to work in Israel, another tranche of Qatari money entered Gaza, and so on. This means it was assumed that their current demands had been satisfied, they will not fight now, and that the exercises are just seasonal. Their intelligence didn't see anything that was an immediate preparation for an operation. Therefore, the army was in a relaxed state, especially on a holiday season, that a major national holiday that had just been coming to a close. The conclusion is they assessed the intentions, they didn't assess the capabilities, and therefore they were in a stand-down state.
We can watch the videos. The stream is already not monetized, but if we do something that's like too much against the guideline, they can demonetize the whole channel or just take down the stream.
Yeah, we just had a demonetization scare.
Yeah.
Right. This is that bulldozer I mentioned. They're getting ready to demonetization scare.
Demonetize the whole channel or just take down the stream.
Yeah, we just had a demonetization scare.
Yeah.
Right. This is that bulldozer I mentioned. They're getting ready to demolish the whole police station to get it back. This is the type of military hardware that Israel is moving along to the front lines now. This is heading towards Gaza. The whole video, I think there's at least a dozen tanks, if not more. And just a tremendous amount of military equipment is being moved right now. Insane amount of hardware. It's going to be big. This is more rockets from earlier today. This is kind of another one of the Tel Aviv strikes right here. Tel Aviv really took a lot of hits in this one. This is what Tel Aviv looked like about 6 hours ago, 8 hours ago. Now it's got to be about 6 or so. And some more damage in the area. And this is the interesting one. Israeli citizens who are abroad have reportedly begun to receive phone calls to notify them of their call-up to active military service. So we're expecting this to be... Yes, we agree on the YouTube guidelines, by the way. Anyway, the Israeli citizens who are abroad are starting to get their call-ups so they can start making arrangements to return to Israel. This is an unusual thing with Israelis. People who are abroad often return specifically to go for this call-up because they are heavily invested in being part of Israel. And that's pretty much everything I've got at this point.
And I'm sure you guys remember, just to add on to some of the information you just provided, the video of all the military hardware going towards the Gaza Strip. It's already at the border, and a blockade has started of the Gaza Strip. The crazy part is Gaza is not like a very self-sustaining piece of land. So a lot of the food, fuel, and goods were coming in from Israel, which has all been cut off now. So let's see how long. I mean, of course, this is going to hurt the civilians too, but let's see how long this blockade lasts.
I just got an update that the hostage situation in Ofakim has been ended, with the hostages being saved by special tactics teams. So, 2 soldiers lightly injured during the operation.
And lastly, then this was the crazy part, the former Mossad chief actually went on CNN and admitted that and this is a quote, "We didn't have an inkling of what was going to happen." He said Mossad had no knowledge, no warning, and it was a total surprise in the morning. Like, all of this started.
The other things I've been seeing is that the Hamas militants have been holding an almost ISIS level of operational security. Small, tight-knit groups, small, tight-knit cells that are perfectly trusted, completely and totally, and therefore they don't necessarily have to talk to other teams much, if at all. They're coordinated from a higher source, but each one is a small cell that operates independently, except for the order to go. Very hard to find those types of things.
Yeah, especially with like the intelligence reach Israel has in the Middle East, which is much better than US's intelligence in the Middle East.
Easily.
It was very surprising that they didn't have any clues what was going to happen.
By the way, another item, UN peacekeeping forces in southern Lebanon started to head towards the border with Israel to try and prevent things from happening there. They were stopped by a protest that was in their way, and now they've been ordered to return to their main bases because of fears that Hezbollah might clash with Israel in the area. So the peacekeepers are not doing anything after all.
Yeah, that's, I think, all the updates we have. If you guys have questions, we'll do some questions for a little while. Questions relating this event, or this attack, I guess. And I think we'll just keep this stream a little bit short. Just keep it like an hour. But we'll try to do streams, hopefully, more regularly from now on.
They're a lot of fun. I enjoy doing them. It's a lot of fun. Let's see.
Let's jump over this cliff! Hello everybody, welcome back to a brand new episode of Brain Blaze. I, as always, am your friendly neighborhood host. Simon, I'm say what am I right in this case? Dave. Thank you, Dave. Round of applause has written me a script, even more Darwin Awards. Oh my god, because Darwin Award videos always do well, and we gotta milk the shit out of that views. Get those views!
That was really violent.
I don't know, that's not how I'd milk a cow. I remember when I was a kid, I went to like this, it was like a petting zoo / farm. I went there several times, I'm not sure why. It was probably like one of the places my parents used to take me because it was like, nowadays I'm like, good places to take the kids, remember them, go there often because it's like, cool, the kids could just do some shit. I can like slightly relax in the way that a father, mother, my wife as well can relax when you got kids, which is like just 5 minutes of peace somehow, and you're like, oh my god, they're milking cows. But it wasn't a real cow.
What?
At this petting zoo I went to as a kid, it was just this like big wooden cow or whatever, and underneath was this kind of replica of a cow's udder, and you'd milk it and like water would come out. I haven't thought about that in 30 years, and here I am.
Here I am.
We haven't even got into the episode at all, have we? Let's go. It seems like only a few days ago that I last submitted an invoice to Simon for a Darwin Award script. Yes, Dave, because we milked that shit. Let's go. Let's go. There is a good reason for that. It was only a few days ago, relatively speaking. However, seeing as these videos consistently receive about 250,000 views, yes, I'm fully on board with continuing to milk that cow. Unfortunately, same analogies. Dave, you and I, same page. Unfortunately, I must start this video with both an apology and a retraction. During my previous script, I told you that neither I nor anyone else had done anything that qualified them for a Darwin Award. While this is strictly true, when discussing the Darwin Awards with a friend of mine in the pub not long ago, I was reminded of the following incident during my late teenage years. Wait, Dave, it's not you.
But did you die?
What? I had a friend referred to as Other Dave. Oh, okay. Did Other Dave take himself out of the gene pool? Oh my god. Now I'm like, what happened?
Gather round, children, gather round.
Now, Other Dave was a legend. He was the kind of friend that should you go out with him for a couple of beers, you might not return for several days.
Lads.
Yes. Those people, I mean, there's less of them as you get older, but those people are fucking wild, where you're just like, what is your life? And how can you have just casual disregard for fucking everything? Like, there's not very many of these people, but I've known them. They exist, and it's crazy. They're just like, kid, let's do it. It's like, okay. What are you doing? Just before we continue with today's video, I do want to share something very important with you, and because it is life insurance. Insurance on your life. Now, let's talk about why life insurance is a must-have. Think about your loved ones. Think about something unexpected happens. You wouldn't want them to worry about money, would you? Life insurance gives you peace of mind, knowing that if something happens to your family, you have a safety net. It covers things like mortgage payments, college costs, so your family can focus on what's most important, each other. So this is how Policy Genius works. They've got an amazing technology that makes comparing life insurance quotes from America's top insurers an absolute breeze. You can find policies starting at just $292 per year for $1 million in coverage. I don't have access to Policy Genius, I'll tell you what, life insurance here is a massive hassle. It's much more expensive than that, and this is why I sponsor Trump. When are you coming to Europe, Policy Genius? Come on, please. We need you. Some options offer same-day approval and avoid unnecessary medical exams, which are also absolutely a thing here, but are no fun. What's great is that they're licensed agents there to help you, not the insurance company, so you're getting advice that's truly in your best interest. Policy Genius is anyone who has people who depend on them, plus there are no added fees, and your personal details are kept private. No wonder they have thousands of 5-star reviews on Google and Trustpilot. So, to start comparing quotes and simplifying insurance buying today, check out Policy Genius at policygenius.com/blaze. There's also a link below. And now back to today's video. On just such an occasion, 2 beers in the pub resulted in us both waking up in France after having spent 9 or 10 hours on a ferry and having no idea what we were doing. Anyway, I digress.
Sorry, I digress.
One afternoon, Other Dave and I were cutting down some trees in his parents' backyard. This job required, among other things, the use of a petrol chainsaw. Oh, oh, As we went about tackling a particularly large tree, I took the opportunity to refill the chainsaw's petrol tank. Now, because it was a particularly hot day and the fuel in this can was quite warm, I did not notice that I had spilled quite a lot of it onto my shorts and t-shirt. Dave, what's about to happen to you? I know you survived because you're writing this.
Spoilers.
But goddamn, this job done, I proceeded to roll myself a cigarette and light it. Dave, this isn't Zoolander. What are you doing? Apparently, I also had quite a lot of fuel on my hands because as soon as I lit the lighter, my hand burst into flames. The situation was only made worse when I tried to smother the flames with my petrol-soaked t-shirts. Ah! If other Dave had not taken the opportunity to rugby tackle me into his parents' fish ponds, I could have been in serious trouble. As it transpired, I only suffered a few minor burns. But if his parents had not had a fish pond, I may well have been the character in one of these Darwin Award stories rather than the person smugly writing about them. Jesus Christ, you have these brushes with death, right? There are a few that... I mean, there's like been one particularly close thing that I think about, and then just like... dangerous shit that I've done over my life, which in retrospect was a really terrible idea, and now that I have kids, I'm like, oh god, they're gonna do these stupid things. One was when I was a kid, I was just walking along the street, and a car just like loses control or whatever, and just swerves straight onto the pavement, and there was a bollard, and this car just like, I'm standing right here, and there's a car like driving around, it's like, and then it smashes into this bollard, fully collapses the bollard over, and the car's fucking ruined, and I'm just like, holy shit, that was close. Yeah, that sticks out in my mind. Anything else? I feel like I've had other close brushes with death, but not quite like that, Dave.
Remember, only the good die young.
With that out of the way, let's take a look at some of the people who've done the world a favour by removing themselves from the gene pool. Oh, also, this wouldn't be a Darwin Award because it wouldn't be my fault. It was just a brush with death. Tombstoning footballer. For those of you not aware, tombstoning involves jumping off very high cliffs into the sea, and it is awesome. Yes, can attest that. It's awesome. Again, not something I do these days because I'm afraid. And when I turned 30, I was like, oh, I can die. I see what this is. Death is now a possibility. And I used to do this, and it's awesome fun. And now I'm like, oh, it's quite dangerous. I tried this out during a trip to the south of France about 10 years ago. Nothing quite compares in terms of the adrenaline rush. However, there are a number of other factors to take into consideration while engaging in this incredibly dangerous pastime. Arguably, the most important of these is to ensure that whatever water you're jumping into is deep enough.
Help me! I can't swim! I'm drowning!
Oh, yes, of course. I'm not jumping into until I see someone else jump into it first, or I've gone down there and I've swam around. I'm not just randomly jumping off a cliff into water. That's insane. You also got to be like, if you can't get down there and check out how deep the water is, how the f*** are you going to get back out afterwards? You're just going to drown. It's a professional Dutch footballer, Morad Lambarati. Lamrabat. On the 12th of May 2022, while on holiday in Mallorca, Lambarat, presumably interested in doing something exciting after having built a career playing the most boring game known to humankind.
Come at me, bro.
Dave and I, same page again. Football is fucking boring.
Come at me, bro.
Or as you Americans like to call it, soccer. It's like, literally, a game can end with no one scoring. What the f*** sort of sport is that? Tennis, people are scoring like every 30 seconds. Well, he decided to have a go at tombstoning. Unfortunately, he did not choose his spot with the necessary care and attention. Stopping only to instruct his friends to film his death-defying stunt attempt, he jumped off the cliff and began falling 30 meters straight down.
That is a really great example of a horrible idea.
You maniac. Presumably, it was at this point that he realized his mistake.
It was at this moment that he knew. He f***ed up.
Although the distance between the cliff and the water may have looked small from so high up, it was, in fact, a good 10 meters away. Given that by the time he hit the rocks beneath, he was traveling at approximately 55 miles per hour, he didn't stand a chance. Oh my god. I know this is about Darwin Awards and people dying and stuff, but somehow this took me by surprise. That's just insane, my dude. What the fuck? Although this can't be confirmed, it is believed that large quantities of alcohol may have played a serious part in his poor judgment. What the fuck are you doing around cliffs if you're so drunk? Just don't do it. Don't, like people say, don't go swimming when you're drunk. Don't jump off cliffs into the sea. What are you doing? Terminally thirsty. On the evening of the 19th of April 2022, in an Italian supermarket, an unfortunate burglar attempted to defy the laws of physics.
You cannot change the laws of physics. Laws of physics. Laws of physics. You cannot change the laws of physics. Laws of physics.
After waiting for everybody to leave, the gentleman in question broke into the supermarket in an attempt to relieve the premises of some of the cash that was storing. Apparently forcing a way into a locked building is thirsty work, so before getting down to business, our would-be burglar decided to get himself a drink of water.
And the thirst I feel is like
million tons.
Rather than taking the sensible option of removing a bottle of water from one of the shelves, this genius decided to take one from a stack in the storeroom. Oh no, it's going to drop something on top of me, isn't it? But oh no, not from the top of the stack, from the very bottom. You tiny brain, what are you doing? This obviously caused the towering stack of crates to become unstable, and they collapsed upon him, crushing him to death. He was not discovered until several hours after the store opened, when staff members finally decided to deal with the inexplicable collapse of the stored water. If only this guy had paid a little more attention playing Jenga as a kid, he might have been successful and completed his burglary, although I suppose there's always a chance he would have bottled it. Ba-da-bum-bum, shh! Taking a shit in the woods with a bear. Have I told this story before?
Bing, 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 bong, 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 bong. Get those lights off! Bing, 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 bing.
I went to Chernobyl, like, many years ago, and I was there with a couple of mates of mine, and we're getting the tour around Chernobyl, and my mate's like, dude, I really gotta take a shit. And I'm like, bro, where are you gonna take a shit? Like, we've got these what's it called? You know what I mean? The radar radiation detectors! Geiger counters!
It's a machine that goes ding.
We've got these Geiger counters, and the tour guide's like, stay on the path, don't wander off into the woods, there's pockets of radiation, you don't want to do that. And my mate's like, dude, I just gotta it right now. And I'm like, okay. And so we're on the tour, and he like holds back a little bit. He dashes off into the radioactive fucking woods and just takes a shit. And then he comes back and he's like, you know what the worst part about taking a shit was? I thought that what I was carrying was wet wipes, but it was like kitchen wipes, and they're really sore on my ass, and they smell like banana. It's like, what are you doing? And to that day, it's always been does nameless friend in the woods, and he does the radioactive woods. We've all been there. He's alive, though, still, somehow. Driving along when all of a sudden you desperately need to relieve yourself, while many of us wouldn't think twice about pulling over, walking into the woods and going behind a tree.
Well, hello, Mr. Fancy Pants.
If I personally came across the same thing as this next guy, I would seriously consider just risking the extra laundry. On the 5th of May, 2018, in Odisha, in India, Prabhu Bhattara was driving some family members home from a wedding. We can only assume that he'd eaten too much questionable buffet food, because about halfway through the drive he found himself in desperate need of facilities. Pulling the car over to the side of the road, he set off into the bushes. I don't think I've ever, while driving, so desperately needed to take a poo that I pulled over and taken a, nature I don't keep tissues or, toilet roll in my car, because it's never happened to me that I've been in this... I've taken shit in the woods plenty of times, but never while I've been driving have I been overcome by the urge. I've always just been like, I'm sitting down, so that helps, you know? Just keep it in, get to the next petrol station, and then take a shit in their horrible facilities. As he picked his spot, he noticed that a few meters away there appeared to be an injured bear behind a tree. Oh, Jesus. As I mentioned previously, if it were me, I would have at the very least found somewhere else to go, but not Mr. Bhattara.
You gotta go.
Was he in the middle of his shit? As he picked his spot. No, he hasn't even started taking a shit. Yeah, what are you doing? I don't care how desperate you are. You leave. You shit yourself and drive home naked. It's fine. You can use the, other material on your trousers to, clean yourself up a bit, and then maybe take your shirt off and fashion it into some sort of Tarzan style, underwear, and then drive home and be like, and they'll be like, what happened to you? It's like, oh, well, I shit myself. And they're like, dude. And then you'll be like, well, the other option was taking a shit and there was an injured bear. And they'll be like, I'd have done the same. Get in the car. You smelly bastard. Oh, dude, I was at lunch yesterday. This was intense. And we're just sitting outside at this nice restaurant having some lunch. And my son keeps saying, boo boo, boo boo. And so me and my wife are rotating, taking him to the toilet. And it's literally 10 times. And he goes to the toilet, he doesn't do anything. He goes to the toilet, doesn't do anything. And my wife is like, I'm sick of this shit. Next time he wants to go, I'm just going to take him over there. He's going to sit down. He's not going to take a shit. Just in the parking garden area, between the parking area and the garden of the restaurant. The restaurant was very empty. For some reason, we were having lunch at 4 o'clock in the afternoon. Not important, but just to illustrate that it was empty. And my wife's like, okay, next time we're going to just take him over there. He's going to squat down. He's going to do nothing, because otherwise we have to go into the restaurant, walk past all the people who must think we're fucking insane, and then come back out. And so she takes him over to the corner. The next time it happens, it's her turn, and he just squats down and he takes a fucking stinking giant shit right in the garden of this restaurant. And it's like, and my wife just looks at me and I'm like, what's up? And so I go over and she's like, he took a big shit. I'm like, oh, fuck. So I have to go back in to the toilet. All the people think I'm insane. I grab like a ton of toilet paper and I go back into the restaurant in the garden and I just pick up this giant stinking... It was like half the size of his body, I swear to God. Pick up this giant stinking and I touch it with my hands and there's child on my hands and I'm scooping it up and I take it over to a bin that's like on the street outside. I throw it in the bin and the bin's full, so it's kind of sitting there at the top and I try to poke it down and I get more on my fingers. Then I go back and I check on my wife and she's like, he's still there. And I'm like, what's going on? And she's like, oh, he's taking more and I'm like, oh, for fuck's sake. So I go back into the bathroom. The people think I'm insane. I get the off my hands, thoroughly wash them. I walk out with even more toilet paper, clean up some more go back inside. The people think I'm insane. On and on! Children. Why? Why? Let's go back to the story. As I previously mentioned, if it were me, I would have at the very least found somewhere else to go. What are we talking about? Oh, the guy's gonna get eaten by a bear.
Spoilers.
But not Mr. Patara. Not only did he do what he needed to do, but when he had finished, instead of beating a hasty retreat to his car, he decided it'd be a good idea to take a selfie with the injured animal. What the f*** are you doing, Patara? Don't be doing that. The best that can be said about this bad decision is that he would never make another one. In spite of repeated warnings from his passengers, he approached the bear and why are they so close? Why are you taking a shit so close? If I was taking a shit in the woods, they wouldn't be within earshot of me taking a shit. They're in eye shot. They can see you. They're very close. They're talking to you. Weird. As soon as he reached it, he discovered that it was not, in fact, as injured as it previously believed. The animal lunged forward, pinned him to the ground, and killed him instantly. Instead of attempting to assist the designated driver, it appears that his family members elected to film his death on their mobile phones. Fucking hell. I hope that whoever was the designated driver for his funeral displayed more sound judgment. Roadside salvage. In the UK, at least, if you run over an animal, then you are not permitted to recover the body, take it home, and eat it. Oh, I thought that you could. I guess that's just an urban legend. I think that I might have known that that's an urban legend.
First off, I'm insulted you only think I might know that. I definitely know that, as well as all other facts.
However, anybody following behind you is bound by no such legal restriction. Is that true? In fact, that's what I've heard.
Yeah, sure.
And I'm just wondering, that sounds like such a strange... It sounds like the sort of law that would be an urban legend, but it's probably true somehow. I always thought it was a little unfair if, for example, you hit a deer, then the chances are that you're going to have to buy a new car, so a few free dinners probably wouldn't go amiss. Malaysia, it seems, has no such legal restrictions. On the 28th of January 2018, Zaim Kosnan was driving home when by the side of the road, he spotted a 12-foot python. Given that in some parts of Malaysia, grilled or pan-fried snake is considered to be something of a delicacy, he decided that his luck was in. Wait, he didn't run it over. He just sees a living snake and he's going, I'm going to come back and kill that. That's fucked up. What? Just stay in your car and run it. Just build up some speed and run that bitch over. Let's go.
You're about to be killed by a Zamboni.
Briefly returning home to collect some gloves and the sickle. Are you going to kill it with a fucking sickle? What the fuck? He returned to find the snake at the side of the road where he had left it. It's unclear as to whether he knew it or not, but this snake was in fact completely alive. If he didn't know, he soon did, as when he attempted to pick it up, the snake made its displeasure known. Wait, I thought he was coming back to kill it with a sickle. He's just using the sickle to collect it? Displaying breathtaking bravery/stupidity, he persevered and eventually drove off with his prize. Now you might think that once he had wrestled the animal into the boot of his car and slammed the lid, the fight would be pretty much over. Oh my god, he's going to be driving the car and the snake's going to escape from the boot like Snakes on a Plane style.
I have had it with these monkey-fighting snakes on this Monday to Friday plane.
And like slither around his body while he's driving. Fuck. Had he been driving a car, you might be expect. But our snake wrangler was too cool for a car. He attempted to transport a very alive, very angry 12-foot python to the back of his house on his fucking motorcycle. Bro, no. There's a fucking 12-foot python! Locals found him, the snake, and the motorcycle at the side of the road the next day. Apparently, although the python had not tried to eat him, it still held a grudge. According to reports, the people who found him had to kill the snake in order to get it to release his body. It's a shame that this mindless creature had to meet such an unfortunate end. It's also disappointing that the snake had to die. Ah, I see what you did there. The Nutcracker. Having just read through my previous script to make sure that I did not include any duplicates, I noticed that every recipient of a Darwin Award that I've included so far has died. As you'll no doubt be aware, you don't actually have to die to receive an award, just remove yourself from the gene pool. Whoosh, whoosh.
Nope.
Although living recipients are rare, I did find a few, and this is one of them. In 2007, a man arrived in an emergency room complete with a gunshot wound and a harrowing story. Oh my god, is this the thing about, like... There's like a whole social media meme a few years ago of people just like pointing loaded guns at their dick and balls. Just like a loaded gun and just pointing it like that. And taking a picture of it. And I guess this dude was doing that, and then BANG! No more pee-pee. Apparently, this unnamed gentleman had been enjoying a few drinks with friends at a party when the urge to urinate became unbearable. Rather than wait for the toilet to become occupied, he went outside and proceeded to pee off the deck. It was at this point that he became the victim of a drive-by shooting. While in mid-flow, a car pulled up. Somebody leaned out the window and shot him in the groin. According to the duty nurse, I examined him and found a small caliber entry wound in the anterior base of his penis out the mid-shaft and into the right testicle and into the right thigh, where the bullet lodged. They shot him through his penis, into his testicle, and then into his thigh. I'm feeling like uncomfortable just thinking about this. So, how is it that this unfortunate individual is the recipient of a Darwin Award? I don't know, Dave, maybe because he got shot in his fucking cock. I mean, somebody else did it, didn't they? Oh, wait, because he's got to have done it himself. It did not take the nurse very long to ascertain that he was, in fact, lying. After a brief examination of his white jeans, she discovered unmistakable powder burns in the waistband. When she confronted him with these, he told her the truth. Apparently, he had indeed been at a party, but had actually shot himself while playing quick draw with friends. So, apart from looking like a complete and total idiot, why did he come up with this elaborate ruse? Well, due to the fact that he was currently under investigation for a weapons violation. He should not have had a gun at all, let alone be carrying one in his trousers and playing childish games with it. Was this Hunter Biden? Although the information on the case is scarce, the fact that he was issued with the award indicates that he will at least not pass on his stupidity to any future children. We can only hope that the weapons charge stuck and that he's no longer allowed to own firearms of any kind. Yes, for his own protection. Good lord. Although if you shot yourself in the dick, you're going to be like, yeah, no. Like I bet if I shot myself in the foot, I'd be like, oh, it was an error, I won't do it again. Shoot myself in the dick, no more guns.
That's it. No more guns. And we all went, yeah, right then, that seems fair enough, really.
Eternal rest. The last entry is another first, at least for the entries that I've written across several videos. Statistically, the vast majority of Darwin Awards are men, which, to the surprise of nobody. It appears that on average, women are far more likely to consider the consequences of their actions in advance. I don't know why, it's like, yeah, women are, aren't they? They're just better at that. Men are just like, let's do it! Women are like, have you thought about this? Men are like, yes, very briefly! Let's jump off this cliff! Ah! Nevertheless, stupidity comes in all shapes, sizes, and genders, and this entry proves just that. Well, it's good to be like on Brain Blaze. We treat people equally. We're not sexist. Genders. The same. I mean, they're not the same, as we just discussed. Women think about don't they? In 2016, Culpeper resident Sydney Zelaya Gonzalez and her friend had a problem that many of us have probably experienced at one time or another. It appears the friend was moving house and in order to make the moving process easier, had hired a Chevrolet cargo van. Can't say I've hired a Chevrolet cargo van. Sadly, although this van proved sufficient for the majority of her moving needs, she could not get her king-size mattress inside. After much deliberation, the pair decided that they would simply place the mattress on the roof of the van. After all, they were only travelling a short distance and it wasn't raining that day. Once the mattress was in place, they discovered that they had another problem. I just bought a mattress, by the way. I've had like been sleeping on an IKEA mattress for like the last several years of my life. So I don't know how much they are, like a couple of $100 equivalent or whatever. Like standard ass IKEA mattress. And I'm like, I've talked about this many times, but like I'm renovating a house. And right now it's like, it's almost done. We're buying some furniture. And I'm going to get a nice mattress. I'm going to get a nice mattress. Go to the store, like the nice mattress store. Fucking hell. Mattresses get nice!
This mattress has fluff, stuff, inner springs, outer springs, and Flexicoil. Ooh, look at the sparkle.
There was a mattress in there. There was like tens of thousands of dollars equivalent. I didn't buy it, but I did spend more than I thought I would on a really nice... It was like a British mattress from some fancy ass company. I'm like, Jesus Christ, this costs more than my first car. I'm like, but it's so comfortable. No rope, no bungee cords, nor anything else that they could use to secure the heavy, slippery item in place. It was at this point that Gonzalez had a fantastic idea. She would simply lie on top of the mattress for the duration of the trip. What could possibly go wrong? Obviously, many things. But in this case, about halfway through the journey, the van accelerated a little too quickly, and both the mattress and the lady lying on top of it succumbed to physics.
Physics, eh? Physics. 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 I don't want you getting all this down.
Gonzalez died at the scene. According to one police officer who attended the incident, quote, "This was not a joyride. It is a bizarre case. I don't remember ever having to deal with a situation like this." You're an insane person. I mean, What are you thinking? Not the officer, obviously, the woman who did this. I agree with the officer, it is a slightly unusual case of the Darwin Awards because it involves the stupidity of two individuals. Although I did several searches, I was unable to ascertain whether or not the driver was ever charged with any offence. No, I can't imagine they were. I mean, it's just like shared idiocy. However, I imagine that any competent lawyer could put forward a fairly solid case for manslaughter. Or, if that's what you're facing, for like accelerating a van too fast with your mate on top of it, then your lawyer's terrible. You should be going for way less than manslaughter. As far as I'm aware, no country in the world has ever charged anybody with causing death by extreme stupidity. I think that the word for it in English is even horseplay. Like when someone dies via horseplay, it's like, well, it's not murder, it's not manslaughter, it was just horseplay. It's really unfortunate. Although, given the way that the world is going, it may be worth attempting to have such a charge enshrined in law. It was the Horseplay Act 2024. I was going to say that this brings us to the end, but given the incredible popularity of these videos, I'm not sure it will be long before a request to create another one lands in my inbox. Honestly, Dave, just get cracking now, because it's going to happen, isn't it? Views. If I may, I'd like to leave you with a few parting words. The vast majority of people like to think of themselves as solid, upstanding, sensible members of society. However, as I and the burn on my shoulder can verify, all it would take is a momentary lapse in concentration, and you too could become the recipient of this prestigious award. And thank you for watching. And we gotta milk the shit out of that views. Get those views. What is it about the ancient world that fascinates us so much? Is it the mysteries that surround it, the secrets it holds, or the fact that these relics are the foundations upon which our modern civilization was built? Whatever the reason, today we're going to take a journey back in time to discover the world's oldest known man-made objects. We'll explore the craftsmanship, the ingenuity, and the sheer human determination that went into creating these artifacts, some of which are so old they actually predate Homo sapiens. Our first objects of interest are so old that they bend the very definition of man-made, dating to roughly some 3 million years before Homo sapiens even evolved. We told you it was before Homo sapiens. These objects, the world's oldest known stone tools, were unearthed at the Longqui 3 excavation site in Kenya. These early implements of technology, including rudimentary hammers, anvils, and cutting tools, literally rewrote the book on the history of human development, surpassing the age of the previous record holder by hundreds of thousands of years. The crafters of these tools remain identified, but their creation challenges the previously held belief that the manufacture of stone tools, along with the evolution of other human characteristics such as increased meat consumption and possibly the use of language, occurred simultaneously with the emergence of the Homo genus. Until this discovery, the earliest evidence of stone tools was traced back to 2.6 million years ago in Ethiopia. Homo habilis, an early ancestor of modern humans, is believed to have crafted these tools characterized by choppers with one refined edge in a style known as old. The advent of these tools was thought to coincide with Africa's changing climate as forest canopies receded, giving way to savannas, which in turn led to the emergence of the Homo genus around 2.8 million years ago. This environmental shift was also posited to have brought about the exploitation of new food sources and hence necessitated the development of tools to process them. However, this perspective has been recently scrutinized. Even before the discovery of the Longqui tools. In 2010, researchers discovered animal bones in Kenya dating back 3.4 million years, bearing marks alleged to have been made with a stone tool. The only known human ancestor present at that time was Australopithecus afarensis, of which Lucy is a well-known example. They would certainly have been theoretically capable of making stone tools, even if archaeological evidence to prove it was then lacking. Analysis of discovered skeletons would imply that they had the grip strength to use such tools, and furthermore, observations show that chimpanzees use rocks as hammers or anvils in the wild, and bonobos can create stone tools under guidance, making the possibility just that bit more tenable. Given this lack of evidence, then, the discovery of the Longqui just a year later in 2011 was most fortuitous, as while it provided no certain evidence that pre-humans of Lucy's type were the exact ones making tools, it did at least show beyond doubt that someone was using tools in that period. The Longqui tools themselves were discovered on an expedition led by Jason Lewis of Rutgers University and Sonia Harmond of Stony Brook University. They ended up at the Longqui 3 site following a navigational error, but soon found their attention drawn to the geological features of the area and decided to treat this mistake as a happy accident. They soon discovered vaguely tool-like stones embedded in the sediment. Upon closer inspection, these stones bore scars indicative of a process known as knapping, which involves striking rocks together to produce flakes, proving them to indeed be intentionally fabricated tools. Geological data suggests that these artifacts were at least 2.7 million years old. However, subsequent analysis of the tools themselves revealed them to be even older, dating back 3.3 million years. These Longqui tools opened a Pandora's box of questions. Were they connected to the older one tools? Who made them? And why? Were they crafted by Kenyanthropus platyops, another early hominin species, or perhaps by a yet unknown member of the human genus? And what does it all mean for our understanding of human evolution if a hominin outside the human genus created them? These are all questions that have yet to be answered due to a lack of conclusive evidence. And the Longqui tools also stir curiosity regarding their creation process. Analysis suggests the toolmaker could have placed the stone on a flat rock and chipped away at it with a hammer rock, or held the stone with two hands and hit it against a flat base rock. But ultimately, these are just suggestions, and until further evidence surfaces, our knowledge of the Longqui tools' creation will remain restricted to the realm of informed speculation. The one thing that's not up for debate is the innate curiosity the Longqui tools conjure. The notion of pre-humans running around with primitive tools inherently sets the mind wandering, and no doubt this innate curiosity, coupled with the many holes in our understanding of them, will leave academics pontificating over this one for many years to come. Hidden in the Homa Peninsula in southwestern Kenya, amidst the landscape that surrounds the birthplace of humanity, lies a portal to our ancestral past, the Kangera South Archaeological Site. Here, between 2.6 and 1.6 million years ago, at the height of the Stone Age, our hominin ancestors were hard at work taking their tentative steps into the world of technology. The Kangera South Site was established in 1987 after the collaborative efforts of the National Museums of Kenya and the Smithsonian's Human Origins program under the stewardship of paleoanthropologist Richard Potts. Teaming up with American-educated archaeologists including Thomas Plummer, a doctoral student from Yale University, Potts began excavations that would soon unearth a breathtaking legacy of those tentative technological steps. The Kangera tool. This quartzite stone tool, approximately 2 million years old, is the oldest human-made artifact within the Smithsonian's collection. Brought to the US on loan from the Kenyan government in 2011 for their assistance in discovering it, the Kangera tool bears witness to countless years of utilization. Its multiple edges bear the scars of rigorous use. The tool's working ends are marked by flakes, evidence of deliberate chipping to create sharp, serrated edges ideal for cutting. Its other side remains flat and smooth, serving as a comfortable handle, suggesting a well-thought-out design and purpose. Intriguingly, the stone's reddish-iron color, which would ordinarily suggest a volcanic origin, is misleading, and in fact, geological analysis revealed it as quartzite, a non-volcanic rock. This suggests that early humans may have sourced the stone 5 to 6 miles away from Kangera South and subsequently used the tool at several other locations before it finally came to rest for millions of years at its discovery site. To craft a tool as sophisticated as the Kanjira stone required a calculated process. It's speculated that a hominid would utilize a hammerstone to serrate the new tool's surface, creating sharp edges capable of cutting a variety of materials ranging from animal flesh to vegetation and wood. This innovative ability to produce sharper tools allowed early humans to broaden their dietary options, introducing tubers into their meals and escalating their consumption of meat, as meat could now be scavenged from larger kills. According to Richard Potts, a prominent academic whose work concerns early human civilization, these tools empowered our ancestors to adapt to a range of environments, enhancing their survival prospects amid a dynamic world of environmental change. There's also a theory suggesting that this varied diet could have contributed to the observed increase in human brain size during this period, marking a significant evolutionary milestone. But like the Lomqui tools before it, for every one question the Kanjira answers, two more seem to rise to fill its void. Sure, we now have concrete evidence, or should we say stone evidence, of rudimentary tool use in this area all those millions of years ago. But as for how it was made, how it was used, and the thought processes that drove its construction, well, ultimately, there's not very much we can do to answer those questions. We can just speculate, at least for now. So, let's bring the clock forward a few million years, shall we? Lest this entire video be about, admittedly quite interesting stones. So let's begin to have a look at the earliest known examples of specific objects. And let's start with the most humble of objects, that which protects our feet from the elements, keeping them from getting scuffed, and from many provides a direly appreciated vector for peacocking and chest beating. It's the humble shoe. I see you in your Air Jordans. The tale of the oldest known shoe begins in the highlands of Armenia in a small cave named Arnai 1. This cave is a natural time capsule rich with antiquity and has been the setting for a multitude of important finds, all narrating a distinct chapter of human prehistory. Among the cornucopia of treasures on Earth, one particular find does stand out: a perfectly preserved 5,500-year-old leather shoe, which you might have already guessed from this entry's title, is the oldest shoe ever discovered. Situated at the Arpa River and the village of Arnai, the cave complex is a silent testament to the longevity and complexity of human existence, providing a natural storage space that kept artifacts, including the aforementioned shoe, shielded from the harsh elements, thereby ensuring their survival. The shoe itself was discovered in 2008 during an excavation led by an international team of archaeologists. Nestled beneath layers of sheep dung, which contributed to its preservation by creating a sealed, dry, solidified layer, lovely, the shoe amazed researchers with this level of preservation. It was not a mere fragment, nor an abstraction left to the interpretations of trained experts. It was a wholly recognizable and surprisingly modern-looking piece of footwear. Made from a single piece of cowhide leather, a technique known as one-piece leather construction, the shoe was stitched together at the front and back with leather cords, revealing a sophisticated understanding of footwear construction far earlier than previously believed. The shoe, designed for the right foot, demonstrated an uncanny resemblance to moccasin shoes, typically made of one piece of leather and notable for their practicality and durability. The interior was filled with grass, the function of which remains a topic of debate among researchers. Some posit that the grass served as an ancient insulation method, a buffer between the foot and the raw leather, possibly offering added comfort and warmth in Armenia's harsh winters. Others suggest that grass might have been used to maintain the shape of the shoe when it was not worn. Insight into the prehistoric wearer's regard for the preservation of their belongings. The shoe was not an isolated find. The Arnai 1 cave is indeed an archaeological treasure trove, rich with artifacts that shed light on prehistoric human life. From the world's oldest winery to human skulls that were used in mysterious rituals, the cave has offered an intimate, intricate glimpse into the human past. But perhaps it is the shoe, in its surprising mundanity and familiarity, that resonates most with modern audiences. The discovery of the shoe did not just revolutionize our understanding of prehistoric fashion or shoemaking techniques, but also painted a picture of the daily life, customs, and traditions of the people who lived in and around the cave during the Copper Age. Every stitch, every crease, every sign of wear on its sole tells us a story of a single individual from a time long past. What makes this shoe especially fascinating is that footwear is rarely preserved in the archaeological record. Shoes, like all clothing items, are usually made from perishable materials that decompose over time. Thus, their presence in the historical record is often inferred indirectly from other types of evidence, like artistic depictions, written references, or imprints left in ancient clay. The Arnai 1 shoe, therefore, offers a precious, tangible link to our ancestors, a silent yet resonant testament to the daily life of prehistoric humans. Let's now leave the humble horseshoe behind and head to the elevated realm of music, an integral part of human culture since, well, human culture has been around. More specifically, let's focus on the Divje Barber flute, the oldest musical instrument ever discovered. Probably. It all began in the heart of Slovenia's scenic landscape when Dr. Ivan Turk, a Slovenian archaeologist, stumbled upon the fascinating artifact in 1995. Etched from the femur of a cave bear, this flute is purportedly around 50,000 years old, a date that, if ultimately correct, would make this unassuming piece of bone the world's oldest known musical instrument. The age alone adds layers of wonder and intrigue, offering a unique window into the lives and culture of the period. The discovery of the flute captivated the musical and archaeological worlds alike. One who was particularly taken aback was Canadian musicologist Bob Fink, who, in a riveting essay published in 1997, attempted to explain the musical qualities of the flute. He claimed that the whole spacings on the bone aligned perfectly with 4 notes of diatonic scale, comparable to the unique finger-like spacing of our modern minor scale flutes. This is certainly a captivating theory, suggesting that our Neanderthal ancestors may well have possessed an understanding of music more sophisticated than we may have initially imagined. However, as with any revolutionary find, some skeptics view the holes not as a mark of ancient music, but as mere remnants from carnivore's feast, possibly a hyena. The basis, the chewed texture around these holes, suggesting an animal, not a human, made them. Some, such as taphonomist Francesco de Errico, believe that the truth lies somewhere in the middle. They argue that while carnivores might have created 2 complete holes, Neanderthals, in their attempt to craft the instrument, made the remaining ones. But as research wrangled over the bone's origins, musicologists like Luben Dimkarski delved into its potential musical applications. The academic musician crafted over 100 replicas of the flute in an attempt to figure out just how the instruments, which was just a fragment after all, functions. His experiments revealed a potential range of up to 3 octaves on the flute, a feat quite remarkable for an instrument of its presumed age. But the mystery of this flute lay not just in its notes, but in how it was played. And Dimkarski was on the case here as well. Using his extensive array of replicas, he eventually came to the conclusion that the easiest, and therefore most likely way of playing the flute was using a unique 2-handed technique. Should this indeed be correct, it indicates a level of musical sophistication that challenges our understanding of early human musicality. Ultimately, the flute, regardless of the ongoing debates, has solidified its place in the annals of archaeology and musicology. It serves as a beacon, drawing experts from various fields to unravel its mysteries. Even if its true purpose should never be fully uncovered, its existence fuels our imagination, giving life to tales of early hominid gatherings around ancient fires, serenading the night with melodies echoing through time. In the deserts of Luxor, Egypt, lies the Sheikh Abd el-Qunan necropolis. This web of ancient burial chambers has served as a sepulchre of human innovation for millennia, each tomb a new footnote in the grand book of human history. Among its various treasures, one artifact truly stands out, a 3,000-year-old prosthetic toe known as the Cairo toe, which, as you may have surmised from our introduction, is the oldest prosthetic ever discovered. The Cairo toe was unearthed almost 2 decades ago in the year 2000, being found cradled in a burial chamber thought to belong to the daughter of a high-status Egyptian priest. Shielded from the harsh elements by its tomb, the toe enchanted researchers with its level of preservation and its detailed construction. It wasn't just a simple piece of wood, nor was it a mere aesthetic accessory, but a carefully crafted and adjustable piece of medical technology far more advanced than many later prosthetics. Crafted from a combination of wood and leather, the toe is an exquisite example of multi-material construction, a testament to the advanced understanding of materials and ergonomics of its ancient creator. Modern techniques such as microscopy, X-ray technology, and computer tomography have allowed researchers to study the toe in detail. The analysis showed that the Cairo toe, while looking surprisingly modern, also demonstrates a keen understanding of the human anatomy, as not only was it still perfectly fitted to the foot of its original owner, but it had in fact been removed and regrafted several times, presumably as the wearer grew. But the Cairo toe is not an isolated artifact. The Sheikh Abd el-Qunan necropolis is a treasure trove of archaeological discoveries, each artifact weaving a new thread into the rich tapestry of ancient Egyptian life. From tombs filled with personal belongings to those repurposed as dwellings, this necropolis offers an intimate, intricate look into the human past. But it is perhaps the Cairo toe, with its blend of practicality and aesthetics, that stands as a testament to the ancient blend of artistry and practicality. The discovery of the Cairo toe not just expanded our understanding of early medical technology, but also provided an intimate insight into the lives, societal norms, and human experiences of ancient Egyptians. Each modification, each adjustment of the Cairo toe tells a story of its wearer and her life in a world that's long gone.
Good golly, Miss Molly! It's news. Some more of it, to be exact, and to be even more exact, some more news about housing and why it's like hard and rough out there, or rather in here, in my home, which, if you've been paying attention, is now owned by Katie, to whom I owe rent, which she is garnishing from my wages and taunting me by sending me actual garnish in the mail, like parsley and stuff. She's like Carrot Top, but sinister. Anyway, here is some news. If you live here in the United States of America, you may be having the same problem. It is becoming way too expensive just to have a place to live and eat and make love. Rents are through the roof, and about 36% of American households are rented. So that means 36% of households are through this aforementioned roof, which probably has a bunch of leaks in it that someone keeps saying they will get around to fixing. Things have gotten so bad that many renters have resorted to costly bidding wars just for the privilege of living in Joe's apartment. Remember that film? That came out in 1996. The same year rent in New York's Upper East Side was averaging at about $1,300 for a studio. Hey, I wonder how much that would cost today. Meanwhile, people who have saved up money and felt like they were in a position to buy a home are being shut out of the market by sky-high home prices and mortgage rates. Those who have managed to become first-time homebuyers are statistically older than they have ever been and make up only 26% of home buyers overall, the lowest percentage on record. And even those first-time home buyers are finding new problems once they move in the form of electrical discharges, flaming ovens, bathtub floor crashes, and Tom Hanks laughing like a seal syndrome. Oh dang, remember that film from 1986 where Tom Hanks and Shelley Long buy a so-called $1 million mansion for $200,000? Fun fact, the actual $1 million house they filmed that movie in went on sale for $5.9 million back in 2018. The point is, home renting and home buying are both Steven Spielberg Presents the Money Pit situations. Even as late 2022 saw prices start to finally cool off, this was still a cooling off from record highs. So it's kind of like being on the cool side of Venus, a chilly heat. So we're going to take a look at the housing market today, why costs are so high, and what potential solutions there might be to change that. It's actually a very simple, complex web of interconnected economic forces, supply chains, profit incentives, and government regulations. Gah! Sounds like a blast. Why is housing so expensive? I probably don't need to prove that housing is bad now, but here are some numbers. Between 2010 and 2019, the average rent in the US increased by 36%, while the median income only rose by 27%. This effect was more pronounced in major cities. An average of 19 US cities had a rent increase of more than 58% during the 2010s, while median income increased only 39%. That disparity between income growth and rent means that a higher share of renters are cost-burdened, defined as when someone has to commit more than 30% of their income to housing costs. By the end of 2020, 46% of renters were cost-burdened, which meant they had less money to spend on other essentials like food, healthcare, transportation, and Blu-ray editions of Steven Spielberg Presents the Money Pit. Again, these numbers are even worse in big cities. In Los Angeles, an estimated 73% of renting households are cost-burdened, and 48% spend more than half of their total income on rent and utilities. And of course, Black and brown communities tend to be hit harder by housing costs than other races. Race, of course, being a fake thing we made up. We should really just have a standing asterisk across this entire episode. Whatever I'm talking about, it's safe to say that the situation is probably even worse for Black and brown people due to racism, a system of oppression based on a fake thing that we made up. You will notice that those numbers are from before the start of the pandemic, which of course exacerbated this problem. Even with all that wonderful stimulus that has so many of us living high on the hog, nearly half of American workers in 2021 didn't earn enough money to rent the median one-bedroom apartment. Half. and 14% of renters fell behind on rent payments during the pandemic, double the pre-pandemic rate. Double. This is likely a contributing factor to why, in the first year of COVID, the number of people moving increased. Many of these people were out of work and could no longer afford rent, and thus moved in with their parents or other family, or looked for something cheaper. Others moved out of dense cities and into the suburbs, or to less populated states at higher rates than usual, either to look for something more affordable, or potentially because they were able to work from home. Maybe some of them were offered money in exchange for spending a night in a haunted house. We don't know for sure, but it's exciting to think about. Regardless of the reason, this temporary increase in movement pushed rents and home prices even higher. But at least, you might say, at least people were protected from eviction during the pandemic because of the federal eviction moratorium. You might say that because you forgot that this country values the rights of landlords more than the rights of people who'd rather not sleep in the rain. It happens. I forget stuff myself sometimes. That's why I'm covered in reminder tattoos. Brush teeth, eat teeth, etc. Just as a refresher though, the Supreme Court struck down the CDC's moratorium on evictions in 2021, and landlords were still finding ways to evict people anyway, often by citing a non-COVID related reason for doing so. And remember the asterisk, Black and brown families were the most likely Americans to be evicted. So yeah, it's bad out there. Unless you're literally stuck in the floor, it's incredibly difficult to get real housing stability. So hey, G's and crackers now. What the fuck happened? Why were your parents or grandparents able to buy a 4-bedroom house for a goat and a smile, while you're out here shelling out $2,600 a month for the Harry Potter room under the stairs, owl shit and all? A major reason is one we've already mentioned, that home prices and rents have both grown at higher rates than income over the past 60 years, a trend which got worse in the first decade of this century. But another reason is that the US government used to actually help some prospective homebuyers. Some, it's a big word there. Let's start with the New Deal. Not the Green New Deal when socialists try to make us gay marry soy burgers, but the one before that. During the Great Depression, President Franklin Roosevelt and Congress passed the National Housing Act of 1934, which created the Federal Housing Administration and provided insurance for the banking and mortgage industry. This was designed to slow down housing foreclosures and encourage new construction. In 1937, the government created the United States Housing Authority, which provided funds to bolster construction in low-income neighborhoods, resulting in hundreds of thousands of new units in which tenants were only expected to pay half the rent. Unfortunately, there was some uncomfortable language in there which contributed to some of the problems we still have today. And by uncomfortable language, I, of course, mean racism. Geez, it's always racism with this country. Heck, it's like Spectre in those Bond films. And that's where the sum comes into play, you see. It's from this era that we get the process of redlining, whereby the Homeowners Loan Corporation gave color-coded grades to neighborhoods based on their risk for mortgage lenders. The public reasoning for this was to give the banks and other lenders an incentive to get on board, to tell them that expansion of homeownership wouldn't set them up for risky bets. Of course, the Federal Housing Administration just assumed, racistly, that places where black people lived or lived near would have lower property values and be risky bets. And those were exactly the neighborhoods which got the yellow definitely declining and red hazardous labels. This trend continued after World War II when the GI Bill pumped $95 billion into programs for returning veterans, but whose benefits, like housing and business loans, were routinely denied to black service members. The GI Bill, which President Bill Clinton called the best deal ever made by Uncle Sam, was actually deliberately designed to accommodate Jim Crow, according to political scientist Ira Katznelson. Also, sometimes, when black and brown people lived in desirable areas, the local governments there would simply kick them out. Like, literally just make them leave. This was the case with a piece of land called Section 14 in Palm Springs, California. From 1954 to 1966, when Palm Springs was emerging as a popular vacation destination, the city started mass evictions of black families. People would often come home at night to find their homes were gone, as in bulldozed or burnt to the ground. Can't stress it enough, they just fucking booted them out. So again, the word some is very important when talking about this era of housing. But for much of white America, New Deal programs were game changers, creating a level of housing affordability that allowed the suburbs to expand and white home ownership to surge. In 1947, President Truman signed legislation capping rents at $80 a month and new home prices at $10,000, which helped everyone, but it was rescinded a few months later. If only the strict cap had stayed in place and those other federal benefits were applied to everyone, and not just white people, this video might be a lot shorter, or heck, might even be about something else, like the Dilbert guy. That'd be fun, right? See, we're sorting through two issues here. One is a state-sponsored system of segregation that institutionalized the idea that proximity to people of color decreases property values, and the other is a very real solution to housing that sadly was only applied to white people. But obviously those two ideas are intertwined. It's very important to recognize how racist policies result in negative outcomes for the majority of people regardless of race. Not that white people should be anti-racist only if they are personally affected, for the love of God. There's a whole other video we could do about racist housing policies of old and the very real ripple effect they cause today, long after the practices were banned, because everything I've just said, the redlining, the temporary surge of home construction, the way we built and maintain our cities, sets the stage for the historic housing affordability crisis happening right now. And also, it goes without saying that the good, not racist parts of the New Deal are things we probably needed to continue doing. Stuff like pumping billions into veteran support and funding low-income neighborhoods. This is exactly why your grandparents could afford a house. But again, we should more specifically say your white grandparents, elder honkies, stale crackers, etc. But instead of making these advances less racist, we just got rid of them. And that's the problem. We excluded certain people from great benefits, and then just got rid of the benefits for everyone instead of making them more inclusive. Because, of course we did. It's not surprising, but it's still disappointing. Like every time Kevin Sorbo is trending. Anyway, we're going to explore the simple, impossibly complex tangle of varying factors that are currently making renting and buying homes so expensive right now. Right now, meaning after these ads, which are happening right now.
Hi, Katie Stoll here. You know, as someone born and raised on a fishing trawler, I've come to realize that life is a lot like the ocean. They're both endlessly expansive, definitely flat, and filled with cephalopods. That scares me. And so I like to unwind with Next Evo Naturals Stress Sebe Day Complex. It really cools me off after a long day of watching out for squids. They can get you anywhere, you know. You better know. Next Evo has a variety of products designed to reduce stress or help you sleep better. They're the only company that uses SmartSorb Sebe Day, which they claim is proven for 30 times better absorption in the first 30 minutes. That means it works fast, like an octopus snatching its prey. I think about octopus often. Such silent grace, such dark intelligence. Anywho, make Sebe Day a party reaching your full potential with Next Evo Naturals. Go to nextevo.com/podcast and use promo code MORENEWS to get 20% off your first order of $40 or more. That's 20% off $40 or more at nextevo.com/podcast with code MORENEWS, in case that came out of my mouth sounding weird. nextevo.com/podcast code MORENEWS. I had to do it again because it obviously came out weird the first time, but that's a winner.
We're back! Or, I'm back. You never left. You just sat there, unmoving, waiting. You f***ing creep. So, given our troubled history of housing development, what is driving housing costs to unprecedented levels at this moment? One of the primary reasons, though not the only reason, is the same reason that strawberries get more expensive during a drought: supply and demand. The supply of housing has simply not kept up with the demand for it. But the demand for housing unlike strawberries, is directly correlated with the number of people alive. You don't need strawberries to live, I mean, if you call that living. But if you're alive, you absolutely need housing, shelter, etc. Supply hasn't kept up, and demand is maybe artificially higher than it needs to be. We will get to that shortly. The supply aspect goes back to the Great Recession of the late 2000s, which was caused largely by the collapse of the housing market. I mean, you could argue that the Scary Movie franchise switching hands from the Wayans to David Zucker had something to do with it as well, but there's not as much evidence of that. Anyway, not to relitigate the subprime mortgage crisis, or litigate it, I guess, for the first time since nobody ever went to jail for it, but decades of deregulation and a market that encouraged the bundling and selling of subprime loans led to a housing crisis and recession. Basically, the price of houses inflated, like an inflating sphere of some kind, because of loose standards for things like credit checks and mortgage rates, until that inflated sphere burst, like some kind of like a bursting sphere that had been inflated. Also, Brad Pitt's there, but he has weird hair. Putting aside the dubious ethical actions that allowed Wall Street executives to put our economy in that position, the market collapse and plummeting prices spooked developers. Spooky. This meant that many builders went out of business and new home construction dropped off significantly, and it still hasn't caught up. This is, by the way, exactly what the Center for Economic and Policy Research said would happen in their Housing Bubble Fact Sheet paper from July 2005. So, first of all, bubble is the word I was thinking of, but also, I guess, a point, you know, on the board for think tanks, I guess. The fall in home construction understandably hampered supply, right at a time when a large cohort of Americans of the millennial persuasion were graduating from college, getting jobs, and might have, in another era, been in the market to buy houses or condos or love shacks or igloos, huts, or lean-tos or geodesic domes. The Great Recession kind of f***ed up the whole plan for them for a few decades, saddling them with lower incomes, making them live with their parents, and as a result, forcing them to watch just hours and hours of Blue Bloods. That chart we just showed about home construction ends at July 2020, and you can see a lot of volatility right there at the beginning of the pandemic, where construction plummeted as the COVID-19 outbreak started, and then bounced back in the summer when everyone was like, well, I guess we'll just keep doing stuff, even though people are dying. Had that chart continued, you'd see it continue to be volatile, as supply chain issues kept even adamant builders from starting new projects. The supply over the last 15 years essentially stagnated, but the number of people didn't. There are more than 26 million more people in the United States than there were in 2009. A mixture of both births outpacing deaths and immigration. And to be clear, overpopulation is not the problem, nor is the immigration the problem. We just need to give people places to live. And no, they can't and shouldn't all live like Charlie Bucket's grandparents or the Beatles in Help. So while the supply side of this problem is difficult to address, it is pretty easy to identify. Relatively low supply exists while there's high demand, i.e. basic human need, for shelter. And that demand side of things is where this all gets even more complicated, because it's not just that there are lots of people looking for places to live. Those aforementioned millennials may have closed the income gap with prior generations, but their parents overall still have way more wealth. And though it's not a competition, it's kind of a competition, because downsizing seniors have more money to play around with and are going to scoop up the starter homes and two-bedroom apartments that are supposed to go to young people. You know, hence the word starter home. And while I'm sure a lot, if not most, of you couldn't actually give a half slice of a ghost's fart about these poor people who are financially able to consider buying a home, it should be stressed that in our current system, we should want people to buy homes if they're able to. If they can't buy a home, guess what they'll be doing instead? They will be filling up the rental market, using their wealth to afford more than most renters can and pushing up the cost of rent, which is what's happening right now. So all of this stuff has kind of a, what do we call it? Like an effect where it trickles down. But not in the good way, where good things trickle down. In the bad way, where the thing trickling down is like It's pee and spittle and other unsolicited fluids. Everyone is a notch lower than where they should be, making the people at the very bottom homeless. Demand is also being artificially pushed even higher by a series of economic forces that are largely speculative. Again, demand in the economic sense is very high for housing because shelter is not like an iPad. In the hierarchy of needs, it slots in right between food and sleep. So, we should want to avoid a situation where housing is being intentionally withheld for profit, right? Now, none of these things I'm about to talk about are, by themselves, the cause of high housing costs, but they add up. The first is the phenomenon of landlords intentionally keeping housing off the market.
Vacancy rates well into the double digits in cities all across the Bay Area, but not all landlords are willing to drop their rent prices to meet the demand.
It stings hard already, and it's going to sting harder the longer it goes.
Jeff Zell says turnover at his properties in Mountain View is constant, but if at all possible, Jeff and Jim won't drop the monthly rent.
The reasoning the landlords give here is that movement during the pandemic turned housing, briefly, into a renter's market, and that local rent control laws would force them to keep units below prior monthly rents potentially for years. And I'm trying to have a response to that other than, okay? So what? Works too. There's no requirement that investments always have to provide a great return. And property ownership, if it's a home you're not going to personally be living in, is just that, an investment. We saw lots of stories like this in 2020 and 2021, the mom and pop landlords decrying the eviction moratorium or other renter protections, given that they didn't receive the same benefits. But, of course, it's incredibly dubious to describe rent as a landlord's only source of income, as it is not really income in the traditional sense of the word, as no labor was exchanged to get it. For landlords who turn hefty profits, it's more like a dividend, something you get to keep after expenses, which for most landlords would be property taxes and maintenance. And of course, that renter's market dissipated shortly thereafter, and rents continued to break records. But to defend these poor, small, helpless mom-and-pop landlords for a moment, even this guy holding the sign reading, "Moratoriumism is discrimination against property owners." Why wouldn't they act this way? Why wouldn't they be motivated to turn their investment into as much money as they possibly can? Goodwill toward their fellow human? Who are they? Santa Claus? I mean, this guy looks a little like him if Santa only gave people typewriters for Christmas, but come on now. They've become property owners in a society that values their ownership of property more than it values people who earn a living through actually working. Hell, Steve Bannon even thinks they're the only ones who should be allowed to vote. And you've got to think a lot of people agree with him and just aren't saying it. You know, like those slave owners who founded the country. The takeaway from this isn't that landlords are assholes. It's that we've created a society where being an asshole is highly incentivized, which in turn makes a lot of landlords assholes. Not all. I know some very nice landlords who don't care about the lingering weed smell or the lingering me smell, but a lot of them are assholes, even the ones being discriminated against. Fortunately for these, it says here, assholes, it's really hard to get solid data on how many units nationwide are being kept intentionally empty. A 2019 report from San Francisco's Budget and Legislative Analyst's Office estimated that 10% of all housing stock in the city was vacant, but some of these might be for good reasons, like renovations, or if the unit has been rented but the new tenant hasn't moved in yet, or if the property is part of some sort of ongoing litigation, or it's a 1408 situation where the room is just super mega haunted to the max. And then there are a few other broad categories potentially involving more than half of all vacant units, which are classified in the report as sold, not occupied, or other vacant. These include landlords that may be holding out for a better rental market, plus Airbnb and other speculators, including private equity firms. It's really difficult to know exactly how much that kind of speculation impacts the housing market overall. The number of vacant units in the US has decreased since 2012, but that's partially because the supply hasn't increased and more units are getting scooped up. And Wall Street owners don't exactly want any of us to know how many empty properties they own in major cities, as that would justifiably single them out as earning record profits while the unhoused population increases. However, according to an analysis by Redfin, 1 out of every 7 homes sold in a major city in 2021 was purchased by an investor or investment group, aka people who have no intention of living in the unit they just bought. And wouldn't you know it, black neighborhoods in the South are disproportionately affected. To defend small landlords a bit more, and gosh, I'm real sorry I have to keep doing that, they are less likely than corporate landlords, and far less likely than landlords backed by private equity to evict tenants. Now, there has been backlash to the assertion that private equity investors like BlackRock buying all the homes are the cause of increased prices. And what those groups are basically saying is, well, it's not our fault that supply is so low. Don't blame us when you could simply be building way more homes than we can scoop up in our little money talons. After all, the argument goes, investors go where the yield is, which kind of makes me think there shouldn't be a yield, the term referring to how much income an investment generates. So like, there are more than 500,000 unhoused people in the US, so it seems like we shouldn't have housing be this lucrative market until we, perhaps, don't have people dying in the street? But also, even considering the argument investors like BlackRock are making, they're clearly part of the problem. Like, of course they are. In certain zip codes in Atlanta in the early 2010s, for example, a Blackstone spin-off called Invitation Homes accounted for 90% of all home purchases. And yes, there are 2 different investment companies with black plus mineral names, like the evil CIA entity in a Bourne film, the Bourne Residential. And they're not purchasing $140 million Bel Air mansions with sub-zero vodka rooms either. They're purchasing the very homes middle-income people would be buying to live in and build wealth. So sure, BlackRock and Blackstone and other Flintstones-era corporations buying all the homes isn't the only problem nationwide, but when they suddenly hold 90% of all the recently sold homes in your neighborhood, and when they are taking ownership of new homes that are built exclusively to be rented, it's going to have an impact. And you might want to fill their Christmas stockings with BlackRocks or Blackstones or something else that might be unwanted in a stocking. Also, the corporatization and private equitization and techifying of landlords has really helped them turn from regular, everyday societal parasites into fully engorged, Peter Green wearing the mask level monstrosities. You're probably wondering just what in the ungodly hell you just watched. Well, this company, RealPage, has a software called YieldStar that uses data from 13 million apartment units to recommend rents on the higher end of what the market will allow. Essentially, it tells landlords that some other landlord was able to charge $2,800 a month for a 1-bedroom piece of shit in the same neighborhood where you own a 1-bedroom piece of shit. You can raise the rent and available tenants won't have better options. So the software says. Executives at RealPage have credited their software as a primary driver of increased rent in the United States and are helping landlords get around that pesky emotion known as empathy. According to one testimonial from a real estate company, the beauty of YieldStar is that it pushes you to go places that you wouldn't have gone if you weren't using it. That place being, of course, straight to hell. RealPage also hosts an annual conference where large property owners meet to, share salmon recipes. Well, coordinate pricing strategies, and then share salmon recipes. It's no different than how all the airlines got together about 15 years ago and decided that checked bags weren't going to be free anymore. And they're the ones who control the planes, so there isn't a sweaty little thing you can do about it. The one difference being that the Department of Justice is investigating RealPage, since forming a cartel to artificially inflate rents is one of those trusts that the United States is, in theory, anti. Plus, a number of class action lawsuits have been filed against RealPage, so there's actual hope that landlords might have to go back to the good old-fashioned methods of screwing over their tenants. Analog screwing, like our grandparents did with just some twine and an apple core. The other good news is that the iBuying industry is beginning to scale back. iBuying being a way to use algorithms to flip homes, often by large companies. See, we haven't mentioned yet that some of those prominent home marketplaces like Zillow and Redfin spent the pandemic paying cash for homes and then selling them for a profit. Just a quick money-making scheme from the websites where you fantasize about moving into a charming 3-bedroom, 2-bath in Vermont, getting out of the rat race, maybe taking up hiking or running model trains or starting a bakery called Cody's Doties. Anyway, those particular vultures got royally by their house flipping scheme, with Zillow losing almost $900 million on the venture in 2021 and shutting down its iBuying program in 2022. Redfin also closed its iBuying operation, and house flipping company Opendoor might not last much longer. Of course, it's worth noting that the reason these companies are getting out of the home flipping game is not because it can't be profitable, but because supply chain and labor issues mean they can't renovate and flip them fast enough. They would love to keep buying all the houses and then selling them back to people at an elevated price. But wouldn't you know it, it's that pesky labor market again, refusing to let corporations magically duplicate money. Workers they're so selfish like that. We need more robots. So to review, we've looked at what the problem is, ever-increasing housing costs, and analyzed why it's happening, including a hindered stockpile of housing and the way landlords and corporate interests have conspired to move housing costs higher. And we're going to do something a little different now. We're going to dedicate the rest of this episode to looking at the myriad solutions presented for how we can address the problem, and why they're so hard to put into practice. Right after I address another supply issue. The previously low supply of ads. Yes, the demand for ads is ever ascending, and we're gonna crank up that ad supply. No need to thank us. Your sweet, sweet attention to these ads will suffice. Bing. Oh my. Have you ever gone to the store and thought, wow, there's too many options. I need fewer options. And then you go home and you're like, well, I should have bought stuff. That's why I went to the store. So instead, you go on YouTube and sort of watch some stuff to take your mind off how you should have bought the food that you needed at the store. Well, and then you watch our videos. Hi, there's no ad here, actually. This isn't an ad for anything. So this week, we're just going to say, if you go to patreon.com/somemorenews, you can support us because there's no ad this week. There's stuff on there, early releases. We're gonna do some gaming stuff, maybe. I don't know. Look, just fucking stop looking at me, okay? Okay, you look again. Back to the show. We're back and we're beautiful, and I'm just about to solve the housing and renters crisis with my big bearded brain. But I want to highlight that this entire problem is only really a problem if you're a renter or don't have housing. The US home ownership rate is about 65%, and for people who are part of that group, the rising cost of housing is financially good. It means their home is more valuable now than when they bought it. And while there are definite reasons for them to want home prices to decline, after all, homelessness hurts tourism and the sensibilities of our valued private jet owners. It is also bad for the homeless people. Those incentives still tend to take a back seat to seeing the value of one's home increase. It's a very difficult motivation to get through. a motivation which is often enhanced by outright racism, given that white people are disproportionately represented among the ownership class. I mean, just look at how the media talks about declining home prices. When Redfin doesn't meet its Q3 earnings expectations, that's the housing market getting worse. Here's a woe is them article about how it sucks that home prices are declining for the people who bought a house while prices were at the peak. It's not enough that they got the condo they wanted. They need to see their investment rise in value every 3 months like it's a Star Wars figurine. And of course, they do. We've designed everything around financial worth and the idea that as things age, they get more valuable. That's of course thanks to the dangerous deep state cabal that is Antiques Roadshow. Tell me my Elon Sleazebagano figure is worthless. I will show you worthless. You are worthless. My Sleazebagano is priceless. My favorite character from movies. Now, the perfect solution to the housing crisis would address all of these things. The financial incentives many Americans have to keep housing scarce, the cruelty of making a profitable industry out of something that everyone needs to survive, and the racism that made our system so unequal in the first place. Surely there are some kinds of solutions we can look at there. Like, I don't know, can we sell dirt blocks to poor people? My reply guy, Elon Musk, seems to think so. Bless his heart for doing that thing that he never actually ended up doing. Probably because actual architects don't think it could work. I mean, you can't even really put wiring in dirt blocks. Seems like that Elon Musk guy isn't very serious. I don't know, haven't really looked into him that much. Another idea floated by weird online randos is to, I guess, move homeless people out into the desert? Like internment camps? Yeah, that wouldn't help. Can you imagine if we did that?
Were you ever within the city limits?
Yeah.
And why did you move out here?
Pretty much told by law enforcement that the only way not to be messed with, our camps ransacked or bulldozed or even burnt down, would be to move north of G, which G is that street right there.
Oh, ha. Well, that's bleak and unsurprising. I guess cops really are just kicking people into the Mojave Desert, a place super notable for habitability, instead of doing anything to help them. And these are really the solutions we came up with? Oh, right, there's also a startup in the San Francisco Bay Area that offers $800 a month fart pods that come with a built-in fan, electrical lighting, a fold-down desk, and charger for electrical gadgets. But don't worry about feeling vulnerable, they all come with curtains that close for privacy. Jesus fucking Christ. Capitalism, you are exhausting, sir. Or madam. It's almost like we should come up with solutions that aren't also designed to hurt the most vulnerable people or enrich some tech company through the misery of others. Just a thought, write it down, send it to the president or whatever. Let's actually look at some actual solutions people are floating. Starting with, number 1, build more housing. Yes, great, let's do it. Are we doing it? Why aren't we? Okay, I'm not seeing anything about us building more housing now that I said that we should do that. Okay, well, turns out that it's not that simple, and there are a lot of conflicting forces preventing it from being simple. We're talking NIMBYs versus YIMBYs versus left NIMBYs versus QUIMBYs versus FIMBYs versus TWIMBYs versus all the people who don't have backyards at all and so aren't invited into one of the clubs. The build more housing rallying cry gets very complicated when you start talking about what kind of housing you're building and where. To break it all down, we've got to start back at that supply and demand issue from earlier. Remember, housing construction has significantly slowed since the Great Recession, even as the population continues to increase. So, in a vacuum, building more housing should address the supply side of the issue and provide more options for everyone while reducing costs. People of means will move into market rate units, thus easing pressure on the low-cost housing for low-income people and reducing rents overall. A number of recent studies provide support for this argument, but also, it really doesn't seem like people would just move accordingly like worker ants. Also, the studies seem to be missing a lot of nuance. For example, this Upjohn Institute study from 2019 found that new market rate housing in major cities generally lowers nearby rents by 5 to 7%. That's good, right? But the fear from housing supply skeptics, who have been pejoratively dubbed left NIMBYs, is that opening up historically black and brown neighborhoods to wealthy developers without firm regulations will result in further gentrification, the destruction of historic neighborhoods, and ultimately higher housing costs over time. Plus, that study is only looking at new market rate housing, and only in low-income neighborhoods. Market rate housing is basically another word for the average amount an apartment or house goes for in that area. So while in theory a rising tide that lifts all boats, why not just also build housing for lower income people? You know, since those are the people who are really in danger of losing their housing and account for the nearly 1 million US evictions every year. These studies never seem to look at the effect of new housing in Birmingham, Michigan, Brentwood, California, or Palm Beach, Florida. So while creating more housing options is a good idea and we need to do it in general, it seems that the push is always for market rate housing in low-income neighborhoods, and forcing at least some level of gentrification on those areas. Even if the worst fears of displacement tend to be overblown, an influx of wealthier residents will always make the overall neighborhood more expensive. Again, the owners of the homes in the neighborhoods might want that change way more than the people living there, who don't necessarily own their homes. At the same time, it's a little unreasonable to expect people to just not move to New York City or San Francisco or Los Angeles or Chicago if they have the money and want to. Maybe President AOC will make it illegal for rich white people to move to Brooklyn, but I kind of doubt it. Big, exciting cities in blue states will continue to be attractive places to live, what with all the big, shiny buildings, so there need to be new housing options that don't put all the burden squarely on low-income neighborhoods. But if you try to put affordable housing developments close to wealthy or middle-class neighborhoods, that's when you butt heads with the real NIMBYs of this whole problem. You know, like the residents of Beverly Hills who didn't even want a subway system going through their neighborhood, citing safety concerns. Or even the small town of Dexter, Michigan, where some residents spontaneously sprouted pearls to clutch when an affordable housing development was proposed near an elementary school.
It's not a safe place to have people that can't control their behavior across the street from our schools.
What a delightful lack of specificity there. People who can't control their behavior are in this case veterans and people with disabilities who have experienced homelessness. The concerned citizens in this story distributed pamphlets with misleading information, suggesting that the housing development itself would distribute needles and devices to make smoking crack safer, as if that's a bad thing to do. The good news in this story is that the development eventually went through and welcomed its first residents last year. But the years-long fights that arise from situations like this all over the country make the process painstaking and slow. Even when a city's leaders fundamentally agree on zoning changes and placing an emphasis on more dense housing, it can still face challenges from unlikely sources. Take what's been happening in Minneapolis over the last several years. In late 2018, the city council voted 12-1 in favor of the Minneapolis 2040 plan, which would allow duplexes and triplexes in every neighborhood across the city, and parking minimums for developments, and allow more dense mid-rise residential buildings along major traffic corridors. The city said it wanted to take this step to end historical housing segregation, and also because of anticipated population increases over the coming decades. However, a Hennepin County District judge blocked the plan last year following a lawsuit from a group called Smart Growth Minneapolis and a pair of environmental groups, the Audubon Society and the Minnesota Citizens for the Protection of Migratory Birds. The lawsuit argued that the plan for increased density did not take into account potential environmental impacts. That ruling was recently upheld, and the city says it will further appeal to the Minnesota Supreme Court. And while I'm not arguing we should scrap environmental reviews and pave over swamps and build strip malls from baby bird bones, this resistance doesn't seem entirely in good faith. And what I mean is, Smart Growth Minneapolis seems to not have existed before the Minneapolis City Council approved this plan, and formed, at least based on the earliest iteration of their website, exclusively to oppose the plan and upzoning in general. As Strong Towns, a nonprofit advocacy group for more dense development, points out, Smart Growth Minneapolis provides no alternative to the city's plan, and it looks like preserving the status quo is their only goal. It's a cynical NIMBY move, using environmental laws to its benefit and successfully delaying any potential reimagining of urban development. Also, one of this lawsuit's main arguments is that the growth of population in Minneapolis is its primary reason for environmental concern. But like, that's gonna happen no matter if they build the project or not, right? The good news is that despite the overall Minneapolis 2040 plan being blocked, the city has been making incremental progress in building more dense, affordable housing, and rents in the city have started to decline while they're increasing in most of the country. So that's good. Really, the only downside is that you have to live in Minneapolis. Boom! Ah, ha, ha, ha! Took you down, you Twin City f***s. Hell yeah! Roasting Minneapolis for having better housing. But examples like that are why this conversation gets so muddled, because left NIMBYs who are concerned about gentrification and the environment and whether or not the housing projects will actually be affordable definitely have a point. But these types of concerns can easily be hijacked by anyone who just doesn't want more housing. They also make these individual situations far more complicated. For example, in New York City, a council member named Tiffany Caban put her support behind a 1,300-unit housing development in Astoria, Queens. Before approving the project, Caban and local community groups negotiated with the developer to guarantee that 25% of all the units would be considered affordable housing, and that 10% would be earmarked for families earning less than 30% of the neighborhood's median income. Nevertheless, the DSA Queens Housing Working Group called the proposal an insult to nearby public housing tenants who would not be able to afford even the cheapest units in development. But Caban defended the project, saying that the lot was currently a vacant environmental hazard and that the developers agreed to pay $16 million to clean it up and create additional park and community space. Further, she argued the alternative would be to either leave it vacant or allow it to become, quote, a facility where some massive corporation like Amazon would pay our neighbors garbage wages for non-stop, back-breaking work that would clog our neighborhood streets with dangerous, pollution-heavy delivery vehicles. She's essentially saying, I hear you. This isn't ideal, but in our current system, the alternatives are even worse. Conversely, some people would rather have nothing if it's not actually affordable housing. New York City Council member Kristen Richardson Jordan helped block a proposal for a complex that would have brought 915 new units to Harlem. She argued that many black residents had already been displaced from the neighborhood and that those people would not be prioritized to return under the proposal. Though half of all those units were to be considered affordable housing, Jordan said this would be based on the area median income and included the income of wealthier neighbors from nearby Westchester. So as a result, the affordable housing options were not really going to be affordable to people who actually lived in Harlem, where the median income is much lower. To quote one of the area tenants,
we keep saying the word affordable, 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 yet everyone on this call understands that low income and affordable are two very separate and different things.
Right. So the argument there is that approving that development would actually increase displacement. Ultimately, that development was killed and is set to become an also very unpopular truck depot. So, yeah, it's frustrating. Nobody's happy. It's easy enough to blame the greedy developers. You know what, actually? Let's blame them for a minute. F them right in the toes and eyes and other places. I would like them to eat my shoes and pants. But also, in our current system where housing is a commodity used by organizations to turn a profit, there's simply no incentive from the private sector to build truly affordable housing in Harlem, Queens, Los Angeles, the Detroit suburbs, or anywhere else. Especially while the cost of construction is so high that developers either need huge subsidies from local governments or higher rents in order to turn the profit they require to do anything at all, even with all the epic sauce dirt bricks. So what if we changed the laws to make some of this work better? To protect tenants through rent control or fine landlords who keep units empty? I feel another segment coming on. Deep in my loins. Number 2, more regulation. Finally! We're at the horny part of the episode. I get so horny about regulation that we can only film these parts in 1-minute increments with hour-long breaks in between. Every episode takes months to film. You guys excited for Thor 4? Yeah, it looks good. Now, to start, there are a bunch of simple regulations that cities in the midst of a housing crisis should probably do immediately to alleviate pressure, even if they won't solve the whole problem. Patrick Range McDonald, a journalist, activist, and consultant for the AIDS Healthcare Foundation, criticizes local governments for their development-first approaches to new housing, and details a few of these regulations using what housing justice advocates call the 3 Ps. And no, that doesn't stand for some kind of penis Ghidorah. Why would you even think that? That's really weird of you to think of. No, it stands for protect renters by strengthening tenant protections, preserve existing affordable housing such as rent-controlled units, and produce affordable housing. Currently, only 5 states have rent control laws on the books, and yet 31 states have laws preventing local municipalities from putting them in place. Boy, we really hate poor people. When I say rent control, what I really mean, though, is rent stabilization. Policies whereby landlords can raise the rent, but only by a certain amount every year. True rent control, which placed strict caps on rent, was common in the first half of the 20th century, but was dismissed by economists since they reduce incentives for developers and landlords to build and maintain housing and ultimately create higher rents for people without rent control. More modern rent stabilization policies have been found to prevent evictions and increase stability in a neighborhood, though results are mixed on whether they prevent gentrification and racial disparities. Rent stabilization laws without a subsequent rise in development and new housing, however, could still have the effect of raising other rents for new units given limited supply. Nevertheless, with housing costs astronomical for existing renters right now, voters in many local municipalities have approved rent stabilization ordinances, even in states where they are currently banned. It's a good idea, this rent control. So good that this advocacy group for property owners is fearing a threat for more rent control initiatives in 2023. Because of course, there are going to be powerful people spending millions of dollars to defeat progressive initiatives such as this. And of course, there are going to be politicians who want to please those powerful people.
Tonight, there is a legal fight to get a rent control measure off the November ballot. Last week, Orange County commissioners approved the ordinance in a narrow vote, but now a realtor group and an apartment association are suing, saying it will have unintended consequences. This legal challenge is why leaders in St. Petersburg struck down a similar measure and why the mayor of Orange County is strongly against it.
Fun follow-up, that Florida measure for rent control was approved by voters by a wide margin, and yet it still won't go through until the litigation between the county and the suing realty and rent companies ends, which is wild when you think about it. Basically, a couple of companies didn't like that an ordinance would hurt their business and tried to stop people from being able to vote for it. And when they did vote for it, they were able to gunk up the courts enough for it to not matter. Then there's vacancy taxes, which are aimed at landlords like dusty hipster Santa who intentionally keep units empty for a certain amount of time. Another good idea, and there has been movement to put more of them into place around the country. San Francisco voters just approved one which will go into place in 2024, though single-family homes and duplexes will be exempt. Los Angeles has been considering one, given estimates that there are up to 100,000 vacant units in the city. Even Toronto, a city I'm told is America adjacent, is levying a tax on vacant property owners equivalent to 1% of the home's current value assessment. These are all good moves in the right direction, but are unlikely to fully address the problem, given that overall vacancy rates, in the US at least, are at their lowest levels in 40 years. Here's another no-brainer for all you no-brains out there: expanded renters' tax credits. You see, if you own property and are thus a better person, you get to deduct some or all of your property taxes and mortgage interest. But renters can only claim a portion of their rent if they use their home for business, and only for the portion of their home that's engaged in that business, and only in some states. An expanded renter's tax credit would address economic and racial inequality, since renters are much less likely to be white than homeowners, and it could specifically target the most rent-burdened households by allowing an additional deduction for everything over 30% of one's income paid in rent. Joe Biden referenced this specific proposal in the housing section of his campaign page, alongside an expansion of Section 8 housing vouchers and expanded housing benefits for people like educators and EMTs. So, you know, vote for him, I guess, if you want those things to be part of his campaign platform 3 years ago and nothing else, because it never happened. The proposed expansion of a renter's tax credit that was actually introduced in the Senate in 2021, though not passed, would have given that tax benefit to the owners of the property who agreed to reduce rent for low-income tenants. Way to go, Democrats! And finally, there's zoning. We covered single-family zoning in an episode last year, and how ending it is one of the simplest things America's slimy mutant leaders, or government, could do to make people's lives better. Minneapolis, that podunk we already mentioned, took steps to end single-family zoning and allow more dense and mixed-use housing. California followed suit in 2021, and more neighborhoods across America are considering it. This is a good step and should be followed by efforts to establish more inclusionary zoning, which requires new and updated developments to include units affordable to those with low incomes. None of that including Westchester bullshit either. True inclusionary zoning should provide significant below-market housing to the existing community, preventing gentrification and a surge in prices. 11 states still place limits on or outright ban local municipalities from zoning for inclusion. Because again, people just hate the poor, or at the very least, seeing the poor. Unfortunately, even inclusionary zoning policies with good intentions are still dependent on private companies, and thus they still need profit incentives. It's how you get failed inclusionary zoning laws, like the one in Baltimore, where the city just ended up giving developers waivers to build without affordable housing options. It's also how you get situations like this, where a 212-unit apartment building in DC was purchased by a nonprofit with plans to convert 75% of the units into affordable housing, but is reliant on funding from Amazon and another investment firm. Amazon's $2 billion housing equity fund has been criticized for ignoring the poorest renters in communities, and the fund's response has been that it isn't their job to fix the housing crisis single-handedly, which is, I'll admit begrudgingly, a fair point, except also seems like the kind of excuse any $2 billion fund can give to dismiss legitimate criticism. Hey, you should let your employees take bathroom breaks. Well, what are we, God of toilets? Still, $2 billion is of course a drop in the bucket for Jeff Bezos' e-commerce side project, and they're clearly just looking for some quick PR and reinforcements for their dwindling workforce. If we are relying on Amazon and other conglomerates to approve the changes needed to fix the problem, we're going to be waiting a long time. You know, until the free-floating space colonies for worker drones get blasted into orbit. Oh, maybe they'll be constructed with dirt blocks. Okay, so further regulations and attempts to push the housing market in a more equitable direction would definitely help, but they aren't going to solve the housing crisis themselves. And the reason why is the thing we've been circling around and also outright saying this entire time, that when housing is treated like a commodity to be sold and traded and profited from, that means that everyone, from single mothers with 5 kids to unhoused people literally ushered into the desert by cops, is stuck being a part of this economic system. We can't really capitalism our way out of this, and that's why the solution we're about to explore is a tad bit outside of the profit-driven box. Dare I say, a little socialist. Number 3, completely rethink public housing.